Councillor Kevin Humphreys. Councillor Johnston. Apologies, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kitt. Councillor Leddy. Councillor Maguire. Councillor McCamley. Councillor McDonough. Councillor Mulligan. Apologies, Councillor Mulville. Councillor Murphy. Councillor Newman. Councillor O'Brien. Councillor O'Leary. Councillor Onyemera. Councillor Quinlan. Councillor Quinn. Councillor Ryan. Councillor Sheehan. Councillor Shovlin. Councillor Smith. Councillor Tormey. Councillor Troy. Councillor Walsh.
Just before Christmas, we had a tragedy with the loss of the husband of Councillor Tanya Doyle, Mr. Derek Doyle. So I think maybe we'll take a short moment just to reflect on Councillor Doyle's loss and anybody else who's lost someone over the Christmas period. Thanks. Thank you. We have two new councillors who were co-opted during a special meeting, and I'd like to invite them. I said that they could speak to a meeting where everybody was the first full meeting of the council. So I'd like to invite Councillor John Smith to address the council for the first time.
For allowing me to address this meeting rather than the last. It let me get up the road to my daughter's Christmas concert. So thank you, and can I say thank you to Councillor Donnelly. She gave me a lovely introduction, spoke a lot about my professional background, but probably the one thing she didn't mention was I am a father before I am a psychologist. I live here in Swords. I have two young daughters, and I probably represent one of the largest chunks of demographics of people who do live in Swords and live in Fingal as a whole. We're facing a serious level of cost of living crisis. We have a housing crisis, which is a national emergency in my opinion, and we have countless other issues that have really struck home. And I want to thank the Sinn Féin team here in Swords and Fingal East as a whole for inviting me to and putting me forward to be on the council so we can fight against those or fight for those measures. I'd like to say a special congratulations to Deputy Anne Graves for her election to the Dáil. I have big shoes to fill, and I will do my best to honour that and to fight for what she has worked for over the years previously. Can I say a massive thank you as well just to the councillors I've had a chance to meet so far. There is something about local government, it seems, that we can transcend party lines, and everyone has been incredibly welcoming thus far. I know we'll have plenty of heated debate, and I won't be found wanting when it comes to fighting and advocating for the people I represent. But there is something about Fingal and something about Swords and Fingal East and Fingal West that's part of our culture. We're welcoming. I couldn't get over the welcome. When my partner moved from Derry to Swords, she couldn't get over how quickly the community opened their arms to her, how quickly she formed relationships and friendships that usually take years. And I think that's so important. I'm so proud to be part of a council now that looks at inclusion and that welcome in every part of our local development plans, our corporate plans, and the day-to-day workings of the council. What I will say is I've been put off, not by the council here, but Irish society seems to have been infected in recent years by hate and by ignorance, and it stresses me to see that, and I will make a pledge, I suppose, and I hope my other councillors across the various parties and independents will support this, in that we need to root that out. We need to fight against that at every branch of local and national government. We see motions coming before councils across the state that sadly bear that a taste of that, and it's up to us to fight for that. So I suppose I make a pledge here tonight to the people of the Swords LEA and Fingal as a whole that I will fight for you, I will advocate for you, and I will serve you to the best of my ability over the rest of this council period. So, go raibh maith agat.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kevin Humphreys.
Very much similar to the previous speakers. Just want to congratulate Rob O'Donoghue on his election to Dáil Éireann. I know he's been a very hard-working councillor for a long number of years here in Fingal. And like the challenges that are facing everybody is very similar in relation to the housing crisis. And both for people that are trying to get affordable housing, affordable rental, and even buying a market, there just isn't a sufficient quantity for people to get homes. But it's more than just the four walls that we need to build. We need to build communities. For those communities to grow, we need school places, we need social infrastructure, parks, swimming pools, and so many different things that add up to a community. So I thank you very much to John Walsh, I know, who proposed me here at the last meeting, and I very much look forward to working with the staff, who have been very welcoming, and I want to thank the staff for being so welcoming and helpful, certainly in these early days. And I'm just getting set up across the way on the laptop, so there's kind of a race over to the seat when you were calling me there, Mayor. So listen, similar to pledge, I think in local authorities, councillors work across parties to try and achieve the outcomes for our communities that we come from. So I certainly looking forward to working with every councillor for whatever short period I'm on this council. So thank you.
Thanks. And I should have started with the notes for the Mayor, so I'll go with those now. 1. County Council meeting 13th of January 2025. All mobile phones should be on silent or switched off for the duration of the meeting. Please note that the meeting is being webcast. All members, please remember to switch off your microphone when you have finished speaking. All members are reminded that the chamber is a non-smoking or vaping area. Standing orders will apply to all aspects of the meeting. Councillors are reminded of the provisions of Standing Order number 92, that all members are bound to act in accordance with the ethics framework and code of conduct for local authority members, to cooperate with the orderly conduct of meetings, the direction of the Mayor, and in a manner that is respectful of colleagues. Members have been circulated with the agenda for today's meeting, and any member forming the view that they have a conflict of interest in the matters subject to today's agenda should now disclose the same. Councillors are also reminded of the provisions of Standing Order number 93, that members must bear in mind that discussions at council meetings are not privileged. No member may make false statements, impute improper motives, or use offensive or unbecoming words in reference to any member of the council, employee of the council, or any other person. Any member having made such statements or used such objectionable words and not explaining or retracting the same, or offering apologies for the use thereof when requested by the Mayor to do so, shall be called upon by the Mayor to withdraw from the meeting. Members making any such statements or comments may find themselves personally liable for them. So, item 1, confirmation and reaffirmation of the minutes. We have 2 meetings. A, confirmation and reaffirmation of the minutes of council meeting held on Monday the 9th of December 2024. Proposed Councillor McCamley, seconded Councillor Humphreys. Confirmation and reaffirmation of the minutes of special council meeting held on Wednesday the 18th of December 2024. Proposed. Seconded Councillor Mulligan. Item 2, nominations. Appointment of members to the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor, the Political Advisory Board. Mr. Quinlivan, yeah.
Thanks, Mayor. Just for the benefit of new members especially, Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor is a collaboration of 8 local authorities between Dublin and Belfast to develop the concept of an economic corridor. The way it functions is each of the 8 local authorities has the right to nominate 3 elected members to a political advisory board. For ourselves in Fingal, the mayor is an automatic member, as is the chair of the Economic SPC, and then one elected member from the Economic SPC is to be nominated. At the last meeting, the first meeting of the Economic SPC, Councillor Tom O'Leary was nominated, so I might call on Councillor Dennison as the chair to make a proposal.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just having a bit of trouble seeing you that were there. I'd like to nominate Councillor Tom O'Leary.
I'll second that.
Agreed?
Agreed.
Nomination item B, appointment of 1 member to Fingal Coast Liaison Group following the election of Robert O'Donoghue to the 34th Dáil, November 2024. Sorry? And they're usually filled by the replacement councillor. I'll propose Councillor Kevin Donoghue or Kevin Humphreys. Seconder. Second to Councillor Gearan. Agreed. Appointment of 1 member to the Local Traveller Accommodation Consultative Committee following the election of Robert O'Donoghue to the 34th Dáil, November 2024. I have a nomination. Councillor Walsh.
I'm nominating Councillor Brendan Ryan.
I have a seconder. Seconded Councillor Humphreys. Agreed? Councillor, Kevin Humphreys. Appointment of 1 member to the North Dublin Regional Drug and Alcohol Task Force following the election of Robert O'Donoghue to 34th Dáil, November 24. Can I have proposed Councillor Kevin Humphreys. Seconded Councillor Walsh. E, appointment of 1 member to the Planning, Strategic Transport and Infrastructure Strategic Policy Committee following the election of Anne Graves, 34th Dáil, November 2024. Seconded Councillor Newman. Agreed? Questions 3 through to 13 proposed. Seconded. Councillor Dennison. 14, report of the committees. They're for noting, are they? Proposed and seconded. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for A, report of organisation, procedure and finance OP&F committee meeting dated 9th of December 2024. Proposed, Councillor Newman. Seconded, Councillor McCamley. Report of strategic policy committee meetings proposed. Seconded, Councillor Dennison. Report of the Balbriggan Rush Lusk Swords Services B Area Committee meeting held on Thursday the 12th of December. Councillor O'Leary. Seconded, Councillor Quinn. Financial matters. A, 2023 annual financial statements and audit report.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, so the financial statements as they were presented to you last April, and the audit report is presented for your noting this evening with the Chief Executive replies. And the Audit Committee report then again is just presented for your noting this evening.
Noted. Proposed disposal of properties, item 16. A, notice of proposed disposal of land to the rear of number 39 Flemington Park, Balbriggan, County Dublin, to Derek Murphy. Proposed, Councillor Murphy. Seconder, Councillor Maguire. Agreed? Agreed. Item 16, notice of proposed disposal of land adjacent to 37 Flemington Park, Balbriggan, County Dublin, to Patrick and Maria Golding. Can I have a proposer? Proposed, Councillor Murphy. Seconder, Councillor Maguire. C, notice of proposed disposal of land at Egansfield, Donabate, to Suniva Clegg. Proposed, Councillor Dockrell. Seconder. Seconder, Councillor Johnson. Agreed? Agreed. And declaration of roads, there's no roads. Item 18, 20, 24, the conservation grants presentation from Helena Bergen.
Of course, this is not displaying as it displayed earlier on. Just apologies for a second, and hopefully it'll start now. Yeah. So, hello. There's a lot of new faces in front of me, so just very briefly, I'll just say that the Conservation Office is the Architectural Conservation Office, so we would deal with the protection of buildings and structures above ground, that there is a heritage officer who deals with all of the heritage, natural, archaeological, cultural, etc. So just that there is a difference between the two, and that I'd like to introduce my new colleague, Brona Lanigan, here beside me. So Brona started in August this year. Some of you may have met her colleague, or the colleague before that, Laura, but we lost Laura in March, and so Brona is a very competent conservation professional who worked in private practice previously, and it's great, and it's been a great asset to have her here. So this is her first council meeting as well, so just wanted to let people to see faces. So the Conservation Office operates what is now 4 grant schemes. It used to be 3. So we have our own Stitch in Time grant scheme, which is for small grants. We have the Built Heritage Investment Scheme, which is for medium-sized grants. But the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage extended that to also bring in a thatching stream for that. And we have a Historic Structures Fund that is for large grants. Now, in the last year, we operated a total of 40 projects across the county, and that was for $250,000. We had 1 or 2 projects that had to withdraw, that they weren't able to complete the works, and it would have been a much higher allocation had they gone forward. So I'll just talk about the different schemes. So the first one is our own one, the small one. So this is for grants between 100 to 2,500. We used to have a budget in previous years of 25,000. We've increased that to 50,000. And so we've left that open throughout the year, and we were still getting applications in October, November. So we have decided not to put a closing date on it this year. We'll leave it open until we fully use the allocation of 50,000. And that is used in general for protected structures, buildings and conservation areas, but also other historic buildings. And we allow for both works and for conservation advice. We have found that some people don't know what they need to do with their building, and we're finding it difficult to find contractors that could do the work, so we're helping them do those conservation reports or to engage a consultant to help them to go forward. So last year we had 28 projects and we spent almost 40,000 in grants. So we had 2 or 3 that just didn't go forward at the end of the year that might have spent that full 50,000. So this is a list of it. So there's 28 projects there, an awful lot of thatch. Of the 28 grants last year, 22 were thatch. And that was really why the grant scheme was set up initially. Thatch owners have to do minor repairs to their buildings on a regular basis. And they also, what they do is they bluestone the thatch, which is a covering to help stop moss growth, and that's insects, and then birds pecking at it. So it's to help them maintain those buildings going forward. So, I mean, there's a lot there you can see across the whole county, and I have some images going forward, but just that I suppose I'll let you go slowly through it. So it's all across the north, east, and the central part of the county where most of the thatch is found. And then there are some within that for conservation advice. There was a building in Lusk, a residential home, a church in Concealy, and there was also a building in Balbriggan that looked for conservation advice. And we also had people come in for brickwork repairs. So I have some images of that. So it's a long list of grants, but you can see the spread, and it's mostly to help homeowners do that. So this is the thatching grant. The individual on the ladder there is a new person. So Alan Grimes is a thatcher in Skerries, and he has 2 apprentices working with him. So this is a young person that's just started, and you can see the work taking place. And the blue colour there, that is blue stoning. So the houses look a little like Smurf houses for a little period of time until that settles in. And a lot of this is continuing the implementation of the Fingal Thatch survey that Christine Baker, my colleague, helped fund under the Heritage Council funding and the Heritage Office funding in 2022, and we are using that to help encourage owners that haven't previously come in for grants for thatch to come to us. And just that there's an awareness, because there's a lot of discussion about this, especially for the councillors that have thatch in their area, that there is now a thatching training course taking place, and that young individual there in Skerries has, I think, is taking place in it. We have very few thatchers in the whole country. There's only 1 or 2 operating in Fingal. And so to try and stop it being a dying profession, they've started this. And Brian Simpson, who some of you may know, in Skerries, is the leading trainer on that project. So it's lovely that somebody from the Fingal area is involved in helping to run that across the whole country. And these are just to show you difference. This is the brickwork that's been done in Howth and Sutton properties, kind of the repair there of the lime mortar. And this is the conservation advice, where they can do condition reports, building reports, or method statements or specifications. And then we just ask that a copy of that is given to us so that we can look through it and just ensure that the advice hopefully is correct. Generally it is, but just kind of there might be 1 or 2 queries. So that is our own funding that very generously comes internally, and we're one of the few local authorities that operates that. And it has been looked at nationally, and so under the Built Heritage Investment Scheme, the national government is allowing people to do a small amount of that money to follow that example of the Stitch in Time grant, but we leave the money in our allocation of the Built Heritage Investment Scheme for modest or moderate-sized grants, and direct those for the smaller ones to go to our own Stitch in Time. So there's been a lot of changes this year. So this scheme in 2024 was 2,500 to 15,000. We only got 96,000 for the whole county, so that only allowed for 9 projects to go forward. But any money, I suppose, is appreciated by the owners to help them do the work of these buildings. So we have there the list, the 9. So the first few, Lambay, the windows, the Harry Clark windows in St. McCullen's Church and Howth Castle, they would all be of national significance, and it's important to ensure that they are protected. And then we have other buildings kind of more regional significance, but again, homeowners among that as well, doing works to help their building be maintained going forward. And some new homeowners in buildings that haven't been occupied before, so that was great to see the works happening for vacant buildings. So apologies for the purple colour, but it's the lighting scheme here. This is St. McCullen, so I'm just going to go into a little bit of detail about this one project, because what happened in the middle of this scheme is we found very significant information out about the windows. So behind the altar of the church itself, at very high level, are 9 windows that were designed by Harry Clark himself. He normally does figurative pieces, which is the long lancet window in St. McCullen's of the St. McCullen is there as well. These ones are very different, so they're very dark, and you can see on the outside they had this storm glazing to protect them, but they're the images of the instruments of the crucifixion. So the design of the lozenge or the diamond shape in the middle is by Harry Clark, and then it's very unusual, these patterned pieces. We were never quite sure, because he wouldn't normally do the border pieces. But what we found is on the rear elevation of these, it's all reused old glass. So if you look in the top right-hand corner upside down, that actually says September 1860 something. And Harry Clark was born, and operating in the 1920s and the 1930s. You can kind of see the face, an eye, and a hair of an angel or something in the corner, and kind of other glass. So there was a mix of glass reused on the outside of this from 1860s up to 1910 or 1920. And normally you wouldn't be as protective or as concerned about the outer face of stained glass windows, but we had to be very careful about these. So there was multiple meetings with the stained glass studios, with the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage as to what to do with these. So it's raised the significance of the windows in that church, that we only know of one other church, St. Peter's in Phibsborough, where this is available. And so they also had to do a protective measure on the outside, which increased the cost of the works. Then our Built Heritage Investment Scheme and Thatch, I suppose a lot of the time with other local authorities, they would grant this for the small repairs that we do under the Stitch in Time grant, but we were giving it to more substantial works. Unfortunately, the two projects we awarded in 2024 haven't gone ahead. Now, one of them is reapplying in 2025. There was just an issue with one, that the building beside it was being redeveloped and it hasn't been rebuilt, and they can't thatch until that building's finished. And the other one had just an issue trying to get the scaffold or the thatcher in place in time. So we will try and get those works covered in 2025. The Historic Structures Fund is much higher allocations. You're talking between grants between 15 to 50,000 or 50 to 200,000 under the different streams. We had 3 projects granted money between the smaller ones, so up to 50,000. So they were 35, 40, I think, and 50,000. And we had one that had a substantial amount of money awarded to it under Stream 2, but they just didn't have the ability to match the funding and they couldn't go forward, so they withdrew. So the 3 that did go forward is St. Columba's Church here in Swords, Sutton Castle, and then a thatched cottage in Portmarnock, and we have images of all of those. So in St. Columba's Church, the windows there are being worked on. They are actual timber windows that are made to look like stone. So again, highly unusual, so that the joiner had to try and do the exterior decoration there to make it look like a stone mullion. So they have a number of the windows. I think it was 3 windows this year. They are looking for a continued programme of works there and more windows to follow in subsequent years depending on funding. In Sutton Castle, they have massive chimneys on this, and there's huge scaffolding costs. So the chimneys were causing water damage on the interior. So there was repairs carried out to 3 of those chimneys, the recutting of the stonework there, and just having to bring in massive hoists to take the huge pieces of stone down to do those repairs. And then this was a much needed repair to the thatched cottage in Portmarnock. You can see there on your left-hand side the condition of the thatch and how that has improved and looks so much better with the full recovering of that. So that was one where it was more than just patching, it had to be a full recovering of it. So 2025 is going to see significant changes. We have actually already advertised the Built Heritage Investment Scheme for 2025. Normally they would be a closing date of the 31st of January for all our schemes. This closed in September last year, 2024. So they have merged the Built Heritage Investment Scheme, so they being the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. So there is a maximum grant now of 50,000, and nearly all the applications were looking for the 50,000. So we have 152,000 to hand out, and we got applications looking for almost 1 million in funding. So we have put forward 12 of the 26. We are waiting kind of confirmation of that, and that should issue maybe this week or next week, and we will let the successful candidates and the unsuccessful candidates know in relation to that, but we can't outline the agreed list until we get that from the department. Then currently, and until this Friday, the Built Heritage Investment Scheme for Thatch is open for applications, and the Historic Structures Fund for the much larger scheme is open for grants between 50,000 to 200,000. So we are expecting a number of applications under that. In previous years, we could only put 1 publicly owned building forward and 1 privately owned building forward. We can do 3 of each, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will receive funding. It's a national scheme, so there may be applications in other counties that are successful, but we would hope that we would get some funding under that, depending on the ones that are coming forward. So, and then, as I mentioned, our own architectural heritage scheme, the 50,000 is available, and we will leave that open to applications. So if there's anybody that you know of that wants to do small works, or maybe isn't a protected structure or in a conservation area, but owns a historic building, they could come forward to us, that we will look at it on a case-by-case basis. So just a summary there of which ones are currently open for you, so that you're aware of that. So that's really the information. It's for noting, and if you have any questions, we'll take them.
Councillor Gearan.
Yeah, I'd just say thank you for the report, excellent work. Just one observation, if I could make it, I don't know if it would be a benefit. I wonder, do we publicise enough on our home website the level of grants and facilities that are available for people, or is there some way we could look at maybe, and I'm not saying communication is not right, but maybe improving it to take account that there might not be a huge awareness amongst people as to what is available. And well done on the work, great work, thank you.
Councillor Butler.
Yeah, no, just to say thanks a million for all the work here. Just St. Columba's Church here in Swords, yeah, it was fantastic work to see the renovations going on there. Yeah, and you mentioned future works. Yeah, it really would be brilliant for Swords if, along with the Cultural Quarter, along with Swords Castle, if we had St. Columba's Towers there. One of them, I think the Square Tower, is probably the better of the two options, but it really would be fantastic for Swords on our Heritage Trail if we had yeah, one of the towers there open for members of the public to be able to walk along the river, pop up to the church, pop up to the tower, and hopefully be able to go to the top of it and see the fantastic views all the way over to the estuary and all around Swords. Thank you.
Would you like to respond to the?
Yeah, I suppose I take a note of what Councillor Guerin has said. We do publicise it, as much as we can. There is a press release. We used to put it into the national papers, but we do, and we have seen the benefit of the Thatch survey of direct contact with individual owners. So anybody who talks to us that we have an ability to during the year, that we know that works are undertaking, we do let them know. But we would hope also councillors that if you know of anybody or any groups that would need funding, that you let them, make them aware that the Conservation Office will help them if they can. So if they could contact us, we'll talk through with it. Okay.
That item's for noting. Noted. Noted. So item number 19, the draft annual service delivery plan. Ms. Egan.
Thank you, Mayor. And councillors, as the corporate plan, which was adopted by yourselves in December, sets out the mission, the strategic priorities and the strategic objectives for the council over the next 5 years. The annual service delivery plan sets out the principal service delivery objectives and the priorities for each individual year. And then they cascade into the operational team plans, the objectives and the actions for individual staff members through their performance management process. The priorities are set out and provide the framework within which the services are to be delivered by ourselves, and it sets out how the priorities and objectives will be progressed in 2025. So you can see it's set out there, each department. So happy to take any questions.
Councillor Healy.
There's just one issue in relation to the public's engagement with the council, and that's how we deal with something that comes into one department, which is proper to another. And I think it's important that if somebody's in touch and one department thinks it's not them, that they actually identify an individual contact person within the council to pass them on to, as opposed to simply saying, that's a different section. And I'm just wondering, is that covered, or is that the kind of thing that would be covered in this plan? Thanks very much.
Yes, Councillor Healy, and I suppose I would expect that happens already, that people who are forwarding on something from one department to another would let the customer know. But yes, it would be covered, and it would also be covered within our overall customer service and customer charter, that that type of information is given. But we can certainly re-emphasise that to all departments, that should happen.
Noted. Noted. Item number 20, the Chief Executive's report.
Thanks, Mayor, and firstly on behalf of the management team and myself, just to wish you all a very happy new year. I know we'll be working hard for the benefit of the county and the people during 2025. Also to welcome Councillor Smith and Councillor Humphreys to the Chamber. I look forward to working with you, and we're here to support you to settle in, and if there's anything you need, don't hesitate to contact myself. I hope to meet both of you individually in the coming week or so. the Chief Executive's report is presented. I'll leave it with you for comment and happy to take any questions.
Councillor Birchall.
Yeah, just in relation to the tenant in situ purchase scheme, I think it's page 75, 76. There seems to be some doubt about the funding in 2025. Looking at a reply to a question from Councillor O'Leary there, which is very worrying. I mean, there's no funding in place yet, and 2025 has started. When the eviction ban was lifted, which it should not have been in the teeth of a housing crisis, one of the containments was the tenant in situ purchase scheme to prevent the housing crisis escalating even further. We have 15,000, over 15,000 people homeless now, and in that context, any measures that can be used to prevent that number increasing should be kept in place. So if the Chief Executive could comment on that, please.
Councillor Gearan.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the report. I just like to note and say my appreciation to the operations. They faced a very challenging time during the recent freezing period and everything else, and they responded excellently, and it was very encouraging to see the amount of salting we actually got done, not only on our roads but on our pathways. So if you could pass on the thanks to the staff, we very much appreciate it. And thanks, Chief Executive, for the report.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, just a couple of questions in relation to a couple of items in the report. The New Street Improvement Scheme in Malahide, do we have any indication as to when the next step in terms of the appearance in court is going to happen? I know the scheme itself has been held up because of this, so I'm just trying to get a picture of a possible time frame. And then secondly, just in relation to the litter fines listed, and I suppose it's a throwback to a question I put down during the budget process, are we any closer to a rollout of CCTV for litter black spots, and as well as around the bring banks, which seem to attract a lot of illegal dumping as well? Thanks.
Councillor Walsh.
Yeah, thanks to the Chief Executive for the report, and just like Councillor Gearan, I'd like to thank the operations team and all the staff involved in the response to the cold snap. I think it was a very professional job generally in Fingal. The question I have relates to the Strategic Policy Unit, and I suppose just one question really, but it says that the draft Consular Framework Plan is being finalised ahead of public consultation. I'd just like to get an indication of when that public consultation is likely to commence. Originally it had been scheduled for last autumn. That was obviously pushed back, so I'd like to get a timeline for that if possible. And secondly, when will the draft master plan, or when will the process of preparing the master plan for the old schoolhouse Clonsilla commence? I know work is going on in the background on that, but when will that actually be put out for public consultation? And does that require a pre-draft consultation and a public consultation? Because obviously both of those framework plans had been identified as among the priorities for completion in the first half of the development plan, and I'd be concerned that we're in danger of seeing some slippage there, especially as the master plan was actually did have, like, it's subject to a decision by councillors that it should be brought forward within a 2-year period from the start of the development plan, which would be, I suppose, April, May of this year. So I'd just like to get some clarity on that. Thanks very much.
Councillor Newman.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'd just like to thank the operations for their prompt reaction to a complaint I put in there just over the Christmas period with regards to broken pedestrian lights, which had a couple of wires, I believe, bared and it was a potential hazard, and they were very prompt in responding and rectifying that situation. So well done to Mary T and the team. Just as regards the tier bikes, I'm delighted to see them being taken away because they've been such an obstruction and a hazard for a long number of years. And I just wonder maybe the director might give us a bit of an update as regards to the new bikes, the bleeper bikes, how they're fared now with regards to how they're being parked in order to, ensure more safety for the people of Fingal. Thanks.
Councillor Corkery.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Chief Executive, for this report. Not a question, more of a word of thanks just to the Operations Department on page 47. I note something that I called for back during the summer was the provision for footpath build-outs in response to the removal of the temporary parklets in our towns and villages for the hospitality sector. So just want to say thank you for that.
Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. When is the new CRM system going to kick off? We're waiting a long time for it, and I'm looking forward to it. I see we have issued derelict site notices for 237 properties, and I'm glad to see that that's active and it's been pursued, and that the council are working with property owners on it, as well as trying to enforce the act in a positive way. And then finally, on the tenant in situ scheme, which is a great scheme, and 359 homes availed of it, and families during 2024, 125 million from central government, 106 families in the Balbriggan ward. And I note the reply to my question says, waiting confirmation from the Department of Housing, Local Government Heritage on funding allocations and sanctioned number of acquisitions for 2025. We'd all be anxious that that happens. And is there any indication, will it happen this month? Because people may get notices to quit, and then if they enter into a process, maybe finally get the property bought by Fingal if it's successful. But we need to know that we can operate the scheme and that the government announced the relevant funding, so we can continue doing what we did in 2024.
Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report. Just a question on the Community Recognition Fund. I note that we offered some money to the community centres for remedial works, and I would consider that this fund is somewhat of a windfall. So what contingencies are we making within our own budgets in order to make sure that we have the monies? And I'm just wondering about the appropriateness of actually offering that money to our own buildings rather than putting it out into the community for community groups. Thank you.
Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks to the Chief Executive for the report. I'd in particular like to appreciate the news about the refurbishment of St. Margaret's Community Centre and the Parochial Hall. I think this is, a step in the right direction, and residents are absolutely chuffed by the fact that, we've started to do something about the hall. But putting it to use, I suppose, would be the next thing, and I'll be happy to see that, once it's ready and available for usage, that, the community could be allowed to get in there. So fair play and well done. Thanks.
Okay. Chief Executive.
Firstly, I'm sorry, is there something?
Councillor Healy just come in just after I'd asked you to speak, but should we let him?
Chair, it's just in relation to the item on page 94 about the requests for permeability and connectivity improvements from stakeholders across the county. And I know they're coming in different areas. I'll be aware of some local ones, but I'm just wondering, do we have a kind of a landing page on our website or on consult.fingal.ie to put this information out here so that people can engage, can have a kind of a point of engagement? And I wonder if not, could that be considered? Thanks very much.
Chief Executive.
Members, thank you for your comments about operations. I suppose we should remember over the Christmas period particularly they offer a 365-day service, so much appreciated the work that they did, led by the Director, Mary T. Daly, over the poor weather in the last week or so, and before that over the Christmas period. So I'll share my thanks to them as well as your own. In terms of allocations for 2025, I suppose it's not unusual on the 13th of January not to have our allocations yet. We'd be hopeful that the tenant in situ will continue for this year. I expect it will require the government to be in place, but we'd be hopeful by the end of January or so we'll have more information on that tenant in situ. Certainly we availed of the opportunity over the last couple of years to roll it out in the county, and it was something that was in demand. In relation to some of the other queries then, on New Street, Malahide, I understand there's a hearing scheduled for the case of challenge of our planned works in early April, and we'll await the outcome of that hearing. I think Mr. Story might come in. I know we were hopeful to do some site investigations. I'm not sure if we have the permission of the court for that. Mr. Story, you might come in, and on the litter fines as well. I think all of the other queries will be dealt with by each of the directors, so I might start with Dave.
Yeah, New Street court date is scheduled for April, and hopefully if we get a successful outcome, we'll be looking to do site investigations towards the end of the year. We are doing detailed design of the scheme, obviously following the approval of the members, so we'll keep the members advised once the court date has been done. In relation to the litter fines, the Oversight Committee for CCTV sat its first meeting in November, where we approved some of the existing CCTVs that were in CCTV locations. So there is a number of locations going to the next meeting in February that includes some of the bottle banks. So we'll get that to the members, but that'll be rolled out throughout the year, where we've identified black spots, and it'll go out to all the bottle banks. Just in relation to the tier bikes, the tender, the tier have removed the bikes from nationwide Ireland, and we're in negotiations with a number of companies following a tender process. And just on the permeability tracker, obviously we introduced that a number of years ago. We've 80 items on the permeability tracker, and we completed, I think it was 13 in 2024. We'll have a look at that in relation to the website. I'm just conscious that sometimes you get requests in that it's one person looking for them or two people. It doesn't have the support of maybe residents in a full location. We generally tended to do that through area committees from members, and we've worked with the members then to follow through on getting those permeability requests onto the tracker. So we'll have a look at it, and we'll come back to you on that. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Just one question there from Councillor Walsh in relation to the Clonsilla, the draft plan. So there'll be a presentation at tomorrow's area committee by the team before it goes on display on Wednesday. It'll be on display for 4 weeks, and there'll be a public consultation in the Blanchardstown Library as part of that process as well. Just on the old schoolhouse, you correctly said there is a lot of work going on in the background on that plan, and we're liaising quite closely with the team that are looking at the Royal Canal and the route along there, and how it relates to these lands. So that's the only thing that's delaying that project at the minute, but we would be hopeful that we'll be able to go out with a draft plan in the coming months.
Mayor, I'd come in on the CRM. There was a query there on when the new CRM system will be introduced, and we would hope that we'll have it in the next 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. I know there have been a number of delays, but we would hope for the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
Mayor, just in relation to the Community Recognition Fund, where there's funds awarded to some of our own properties or some of the community centres, we do go through a process with them to ensure that it's additional to whatever might be planned in terms of the community department's budgets and plans for properties.
And just in relation to St Margaret's
whole team in the community department are liaising with the local community, and we look forward again to getting that facility actively used in cooperation with a number of different community groups. So that's ongoing and active at the moment.
Are all those queries happy enough? Okay, so we move on to, we note the report, noted. Move on to item number 21, public procurement. Proposed. Ireland has one of the lowest rates of employment for disabled people in the whole of Europe. The average employment rate for people who are disabled in Europe is 51%. In Ireland, it's 31%. There are some structural issues which cause that. Part of it is around how people are treated from both a social welfare point of view, from a disability payment point of view, and also from a medical card point of view when they start employment. So you can lose, once you go over a certain threshold of hours, certain threshold of income, you can lose some of the supports that you should receive. So that's something that can really only be done structurally by the government, and I think we would hope to see progress on that from everyone over a period of time. There are also difficulties, as anything within Europe, that we're making sure we're measuring like by like. So there are other countries that may have a higher employment rate, but the quality of some of that employment may be questionable. So there is some of that employment is created by institutional employment, low quality employment, or people who are in residential care and employed, but it may not be that they're actually receiving the kind of services and dignity that that would be perfect, that we would hope for. So what this is, it's on foot of campaign and work with Rehab, is that there is an opportunity, and there is an Article 20 of the EU Public Procurement Directive that allows public procurers to reserve contracts to encourage the employment of disabled people. So what this motion is seeking to do is just to allow and to encourage the manager and the management to look at any public procurement contracts we have and to adopt them in line with best practice and policy, to find ways of encouraging people with high rate success, for people who have high rates of employment of disabled people within their organisation. Now again, it's going to vary from contract to contract, how you do it. It's not for me here to describe in detail as to how we best achieve it, but given that we have that directive and that derogation, I'd like the Council's support in encouraging management to look at ways that we can improve business for businesses who contract in to the Council that have higher rates of employment for people with disabilities, so that somebody an organisation, a private organisation or a business that has gone out, that has not gone out of their way is the wrong thing, because people with disabilities have skills, but there is a perception sometimes, and there can be difficulties in getting access to employment, and this is just another way of encouraging to try and increase that, to increase the level of engagement, and that it is something that to show that we're willing, that we're looking to improve that. So I would hope, I welcome the report, and I'd like to pass the motion. Councillor Gearan.
Yeah, thanks for bringing the motion. If I could just make a comment, whilst I'm not opposing, because I'm very supportive of what you're saying, I think that you also hit on it when you spoke about the difficulties when people go into employment and the benefits that they lose. And indeed, people who would be maybe in receipt, not of disability, but family income supplement, that when they go in certain areas, they lose benefits. So I would have liked that the motion would have contained something that's something that really needs to be addressed, because from my experience and going around and talking, people want within their organisations to encourage employment of all people, and that's like giving me the impression that we're suggesting Fingal and others take a higher hand. The issue, I don't believe, is with the employers. I believe it's with the cost effect to people with disabilities or people on family income supplement when they do increase hours or take jobs. So if both could be done in tandem, I'm fully supportive of the intent, but I would just like to make those comments because I believe that they are important.
Given that there are no other speakers, I'll come in myself. So the motion is designed to be very focused at what Fingal can do. So having acknowledged that the other pieces aren't within the remit of Fingal, and there's no, it's not about blaming X, Y, Z. It means no mention of any particular. But if we have a circumstance where, during a competition, it's not that it's going to be the only thing that you would look at, but I think it's reasonable for us to look at ways that we can go through the directive. And I have no doubt that you want to, we're not going to put ourselves in a position where that one item will allow us to or would encourage us to pick a tender or a supplier that is going to be worse have a worse outcome. But what it is merely, and this is why it doesn't mention anything else, because anything else is outside of the remit of the council. What this is just a motion passed which allow the chief executive to put in place as a part of a policy that becomes one of perhaps the items against which you're judged as part of a tender. Not and how that's scored would change from tender to tender, but that it's something that we would consider. And there are employers. It's about rewarding employers, I would think, rather than anything else. So there are employers who are extremely good and have high rates of employment. So it would be just in recognition that that's something that we can do, and I would seek the support of the council. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thanks. Item number 22. Conference report, Lama Spring Seminar, the 30th to 31st of January 2025, Kilfin Arms Hotel, Kilkenny. Noted. 23, correspondence, email dated the 17th of December from Donegal County Council, re the restoration or creation of town councils. Noted. Item B, email 17th of December 2024 from Donegal County Council, re rainwater harvesting. Noted. Item C, email dated 19th of December 2024 from ESB Networks, re-item 41 from Councillor Sheehan, reconnection of houses to the electricity supply. I'll get that up. Yeah. Noted. No ministerial correspondence, and that brings us on to motions. Item number 25, Councillor Boland, number of planning applications lodged by the DA since September 2022. Proposed by Councillor Boland, second by Councillor Newman. Councillor Boland.
Thank you very much. This shows us a list of, I think it's 15 planning applications which have been made. The reason I put it down was just to see how many applications and the expertise that the DA must have. But the thing that fascinates me about the DA applications is the number of times that additional information has to be sought. It would suggest to me that they either are purposely withholding elements of the application to give a time lag, to allow certain individuals in the airline industry the opportunity to blow their mouth off, suggesting that there is a delay in the planning process as operated by this council. And I think that that is an abuse of their position, and it certainly is an abuse of the facts. The reality is that if the DAA had performed their functions correctly, the whole issue with regard to the cap, all of the services that they complain have been delayed, would have been resolved and they would have had certainty going forward. I think that the real message that needs to come out from the manner in which they operate their planning applications is that the management or the executive or the board of the DAA are simply incompetent, and that those who do business with them are equally rash and foolish in terms of making contracts with them for slots at the airport. Equally have demonstrated that they don't understand the business which they're actually operating in. There are very few people who would go in and buy a pig in a poke. Thank you.
Any other speakers? No. The report is noted, or the report is accepted. Item number 26, Councillor Dockrell.
Thank you, Mayor, and
Proposed?
thanks. Oh, yeah, proposed.
Councillor O'Leary, seconded.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks to the Council for the response I received. This motion is all about ensuring that projects undertaken by the Council with public funds are progressed and completed as efficiently as possible. I appreciate the Council's response where there's reference to the Quality Assurance Report that's produced and submitted to the National Oversight and Audit Committee. And there's also reference in the response I received to the Local Government Audit Service. And I'm on the the Internal Audit Committee, and aware of the work that's done from an audit point of view. But I suppose what this motion is about, it's not so much looking at the financial side or financial risks, and more looking at it from an operational perspective, and that's why I'm putting forward this motion. I think there's over 600 million worth of capital projects on site across Fingal at the moment. Many of these projects are complex with multi-year timelines and significant procurement challenges. So it's understandable that there's a risk that projects aren't always progressed on schedule, or there's a risk of overspending. One way to address and mitigate these types of risks is by having processes and a procedural framework in place where we can review a small sample of projects, be it on an annual or a biannual basis, to see how things could be done better at the various kind of life stages throughout a project. We're already kind of picking samples as part of the audit work and the audit committee, so we could carry out a kind of a similar exercise from an operational point of view. It's my understanding that I think there's even going to be a risk officer appointed by the council, and this could be something that could come partly under their remit in time. And as part of this sample, you'd be looking at a range of aspects of a project, from what the contractors are doing to interviewing project managers and getting their feedback, to looking at the terms of a contract. I see this as a real opportunity to kind of interview people basically and get their feedback on how things could be done better. Then when we kind of carry out these reviews, it wouldn't just be resulting in a report that would sit on a shelf. We'll be able to put in place processes to ensure that projects are done more efficiently. Having a procedural framework in place is something that's done in big organisations pretty much everywhere to keep costs down and delivery on time. It should be no different from a local authority perspective, where we're responsible for ensuring public money is spent on public projects with minimal waste and delivered on time for people in Fingal. So in summary, by better understanding the risks that are present as part of these projects, we can plan to better mitigate these risks by implementing better processes and having a kind of procedural framework in place for supporting the completion of these council-funded projects. In a recent council meeting, the Chief Executive pointed out that there's about 111 projects on site at the moment, and while it was stated that there's good skills in-house to manage this significant commitment, I think we should always be looking to do better. This is something, again, I'd like to work on with the support of councillors here and council officials, and I hope this motion passes. Thanks.
Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. I think it's a good motion. I think as councillors we'd all be aware of, let's call it slippage, projects starting out, projects not starting, large delays, long delays, lots of pressure on the council officials, all sorts of things. And I think it would be no harm to do this. How it will be done, I don't know. But I would welcome other than what's there already, you know, you refer to the various national bodies and audit committees, that we do take a sample, and we do shine the light in and have a look, see in a positive manner now, not in any threatening manner, in a positive manner, to try and learn how we can do better. I think that's sensible. I don't know if it happens elsewhere, in other councils or corporate companies, but I'd be supporting the motion anyway. I've seconded it, but I think it's a good motion.
Councillor Gearin.
Thanks, Wes. I think I understand the sentiment of the motion. I have a view that it's slightly leads to a type of conflict or whatever, where the members will be interfering more in the executive role. I did read the auditor's report that came out with this pack and with other things, and there seems to be a system of checks in place in relation to the way we do our business. I just worry that something like this could lead to there being an interference in what is primarily executive's role, and I would welcome a response from the manager in relation to that query. Thank you.
Councillor Mulligan.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Docker, for bringing this forward. I think it's a good idea in principle, but I think adding more red tape to an already difficult situation in terms of tendering, contracting and getting works carried out, it doesn't help getting works carried out in any meaningful way. If we're at a place where works are carried out in a manner in which we'd love to see it happen, in the timelines in which we are happy with, and as other councillors alluded to, in a fashion and to a standard in which we're all happy with, then something like this would be great, because you're looking for perfection. But in a situation like this, I think altering our terms of reference or how we look at tendering and the quality of work that we tender out and the finished product should be our prerogative, rather than auditing and adding another layer of red tape or another barrier to actually progressing works, which we're already struggling with, although we have a huge amount on our plate as a local authority. Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I appreciate the sentiments of the motion and the way Councillor Dockrell introduced it, but I suppose the question I have for Mr Hunt, who prepared the report, is if this motion is passed, I mean, what would be the material impact in terms of, you know, the oversights that are referred to in the report to the motion, and kind of how, you know, Councillor Mulligan mentions red tape. I mean, how it would impact the way the council goes about its business in managing projects, but also whether in Mr Hunt's view, it would deliver a benefit above and beyond those oversights that are already in place. Thanks.
Councillor James Humphreys.
Thank you, Mayor. And kind of similar to the last couple of speakers, I'd certainly have reservations about adding more procedural work to the tendering process and the oversight. If we're going to be focusing on anything, I'd certainly would like to see kind of increase in the clerical officers to kind of audit and overlook third-party road openings rather than something that's kind of as comprehensive as this. But I kind of looking forward to hearing Mr Hunt's response to Councillor O'Brien's questions.
Councillor Newman.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I think it's a very good motion, and I think the sentiments in it, I think, are very valid. You know, I thank Councillor Docker for bringing it forward. I do think the report actually gives a good response to what you're looking for there, and I certainly think that you know, the public spending code, you know, keeps the council on track, and I've no doubt from experience over the last number of years that, you know, that they really always try to ensure within the realms of their, you know, power to ensure that, you know, developments are complete on time and resurface and things like that. And it's a hard job at times for them to follow through with developers that have, you know, not necessarily finished their developments to the standard they should do. But I think the report actually is a good report and good reply, and I support the report. Thanks.
Councillor McCamley.
Yeah, it's just really a question.
Councillor Dockrell said that it wasn't so much to do with funding, I think, was more learnings from what would be going. So it would be like an evaluation of what took place. So really, in a way, we shouldn't be talking to Oliver. It should be more people from operations. Am I right? Like when a person does a job, you evaluate it. Sorry, Oliver. Sorry, Mary. But that's what I'm taking from the motion, that it's not to do with funding or to do with, it's to do with a learning process when to evaluate a job when it's done. Am I right or am I wrong? That's all I'm asking you.
No other speakers. From my own point of view, I completely understand, you know, the intention behind the motion. However, it's very generalised in terms of what it's seeking to deliver, and there's a vast range of difference between size, shape, and quality of different projects. So, in relation to learnings, you expect where there's a huge difference between a 20 million capital project and a road resurfacing project. So if a road resurfacing, for example, has gone, you know, that's either worked or it's not. There's a small amount of technical examination that should be overseen by an engineer in relation to that. And I'm not sure how much benefit there is to that. There's a huge amount of benefit from experience. What we should be trying to do is to hold on to experienced people and to make sure that this, you know, that Fingal is a good place to work. I'm reluctant to eliminate this entirely because there may be a process of review that the manager or other managers may look to develop. So it's not a bad idea, but I'd be very reluctant for us to impose such a generalised shape through an active motion on management, as Councillor Gearan would have said to do. And I think the biggest challenge that we have, or that I have, is resources, and it's people resources within the council in order to deliver on those projects. So we do have money, we've backing from the councillors, and what we lack is people to implement projects. So my concern is, if we set up a unit of 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 people to conduct these reviews, that we'll actually be looking at not very specific learnings and a reduction in the amount. I would, if the executive require us to provide the resources, if they decide to do this, I'd happily support it. I think it's a very valuable motion to have brought, and a valuable discussion to be had. I'll bring the Chief Executive in before I come back to Councillor Dockrell, if that's all right. Mr. Hunt first.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, so look, I don't think we want to be kind of doubling up in anything here. There's a few elements to it. There's the NOAC piece, which is substantive, but there's also the piece of work, the reviews that's done, particularly required by our funders, whether it's the department in relation to housing or the NTA in relation to infrastructure, and there is significant work done by that. And it's also part of the life cycle of those projects that there would be reviews done with them. So I think what might be useful for the councillor is if the relevant director starts to feed in some of that information into you, and you can kind of see what's there. If there's, you know, stuff then that you want to refine within that, that might be the way forward. I don't think it's the intention of the motion to double up on necessarily what's done there. And to be fair, the reply doesn't really maybe not give justice to the level of work that is done and the professionals and the engineers that work across multiple departments in doing that. So that might be the way forward, rather than kind of throwing all that up today.
Chief Executive.
Maybe just to add on, to Mr. Hunt's statement there, I suppose we have a capital programme of £1.5 billion, so of course we need good governance in place, and that includes the audit committee and the external auditor, but more importantly it includes the management team and the senior management group and the project managers of each of the projects. At least 3/4 of the capital programme is funded by government, so we're already involved in, say, the likes of a 4-stage approval process for social housing, a multiple stage approval process for transport funded projects. So there's a lot of processes involved in project promotion and delivery. So it would be important not to duplicate what already exists. Post-project reviews are required. They're simply the only mechanism we have to complete that project delivery process that we're involved in with government, and funds won't be released until you've completed that. So a lot of what's been sought by the councillor is already in place. And the learning, I suppose, in terms of each of the projects feeds in through the management team and other processes we have involved. In addition to that, now we've a fairly sophisticated IT monitoring system in place, which is helping us identify within our capital plan what barriers there are to delivery, what obstructions we're facing, and what can cause delay. In terms of our projects on site, there's no doubt we need to monitor what's on site to make sure that overspends between each of the projects wouldn't have a detrimental effect on the delivery of new projects into the future, because we've significant projects on site and that spend is quite substantial, probably up to about 800 million on site at the moment, or about to go on site. So I agree with the motion, but just from the perspective of good governance. But I think a lot of what has been sought in the motion is already in place. So if we are to add unnecessary processes, it will cause delay.
Councillor Dockel.
Thanks very much for that response. So the last thing I want to do is add an additional layer of red tape. This is more about selecting a very small sample, because I think we all know what projects there might be, and they're in the minority. I appreciate that most projects happen here on time, but there's always a small number of projects that are either delayed or they're slow in starting, and I think there's a tendency to just accept the delays and move on to the next project. What I'm kind of seeking here is that a very small sample of projects are reviewed, where we'd be seeking feedback in an interview setting, say with the project managers, the contractors, the designers, because as the Mayor rightly pointed out, there's plenty of people with experience throughout the life cycle, and I think we could learn a lot from just sitting down and speaking to them. And look, this wouldn't, I realise there's a lot of good work done already from a financial perspective on the audit committee and elsewhere. This is just purely about kind of carrying out interviews, getting feedback, applying learnings, and maybe putting in additional processes in place to ensure that there is cost savings for future projects. But I appreciate the response that was provided by council officials. Thanks.
Do you want to accept the manager's report?
Yeah, accept the report, but maybe we could continue the conversation, with the council officials. Yeah.
Okay. Accept the manager's report. Thank you. Councillor O'Brien, Community Warden.
Thanks very much, Mayor. I suppose just to give a bit of background on where I'm coming from on this, I think we've probably over the years, as the county has grown, we probably haven't effectively, in my view, or effectively enough, moved to a system of enforcement of our bylaws that is effective, or as effective as it could be, in my view. I've a number of questions I would have put down to the budget meeting, just around numbers of staff, etc., etc. And I don't mean to pick on a particular department, but the information was to hand. I actually didn't get a response back in relation to traffic enforcement under the question that I asked. But just to give an example, we've 4 litter wardens county-wide, split between 1 for Dublin 15, 1 for Hope Malahide, 1 Swords Donabate, and 1 Balbriggan, Rush, Lusk and Skerries. I think we should be looking to overhaul our system, with the amount of staff that we have kind of crisscrossing the county, and try and put a more local focus and be more effective in that way. Because, and again, just to give an example, I had an issue just post Christmas of an incident with a restricted breed of dog, and Mr. Story was very quick back to me. So this is not at all a criticism. But when I reported the incident that happened in Kettles Park, the dog warden was in Balbriggan and they were coming down to investigate after that. But obviously the owner of said dogs was long gone by that stage. I think we can see certain areas where we do enforcement very well, parking, pay and display, etc. And I think we need to apply that across. And I think if we need to, or we should look to a system that is more localised and has more roles involved than the kind of singular approach per bylaw that we've seen over the years. We also, the total number of outdoor staff the council has is over 500. Now, I'm not for a second suggesting that all of our outdoor staff should be able to enforce the bylaws, but there certainly should, in my view, be room to change up our system so that we're more effective. If we look around and we don't pass the eye test when it comes to dog fouling, litter in general in the county. If there are parking enforcement issues beyond our pay and display areas, we have 2 staff members with the county-wide remit to take those on. So I respectfully disagree with the approach taken in the report, and I certainly believe that we should overhaul our system and start moving towards a community warden system as referenced in the motion. Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor Healy.
Thanks, Mayor, and I'd like very strongly to support Councillor O'Brien. I think there's probably a kind of a spectrum in between whereby we can have wardens who, over time, in particular, as they get additional training and can expand from one area to the other. But I think the idea that we have people specifically restricted to very narrow areas of enforcement doesn't make sense. A lot of the skills of enforcement, in terms of dealing with people, in terms of evidence gathering and so on, are transferable between different areas. And I think we should see it as something for our own officials as desirable, that people would add to their skills and be rewarded accordingly for doing a wider job with greater responsibilities. Thank you.
From my own point of view, I certainly want to support the motion. I think there is certainly some level of specialisation is required. In terms of one of the examples of having been given there was dog wards. But I also think in terms of local coverage and having a greater amount of coverage from more people who are trained to enforce bylaws, I think would be very beneficial on a number of areas. I think we can strike a balance there. The example I'm thinking of is where we expanded parking warden enforcement from being just in designated parking areas to other areas, and it's become it's not a panacea. This is not a panacea for littering, for some of the dog fouling. I don't think any of us can kid ourselves that there isn't an underlying problem there. But when I think it has made an impact in relation to being able to improve behaviour by having parking wardens able to do enforcement alongside the Gardaí and other places. And I think that there's a similar possibility. I don't underestimate what a difficult job it is going to be for those people and the support that they're going to require. And it's maybe a gradual project and look at a pilot, but I'd be certainly happy to support the motion as it is on that basis. I don't know who wants to. Ms Daly's only too delighted to come in and take this motion.
Mayor, thank you very much to speak for the first time in 2025. So I suppose you have to compare like with like, and I wouldn't be comparing the enforcement of the parking bylaws with the enforcement of the other bylaws. They would be slightly different, much bigger body of work with regards to the enforcement of the parking bylaws, and that's very tight, the bylaws and the way that they have been drafted and adopted and the contractor that has been appointed. So I just wanted a bit of caution there with regards to comparing it to the parking bylaws. With regards to the parking bylaws that I have the parks and open space bylaws, we have the beach bylaws, casual trading bylaws, we also have the harbour bylaws, and we also have the burial ground bylaws. And authorised officers, in accordance with the Local Government Act 2001, authorised officers are appointed under each of those bylaws, and those authorised officers then follow up with regards to any issues that may come up. For example, we would have had issues with a number of tents over on Malahide Beach, and the authorised officer was able to serve notices to the people who owned those tents to get them off the beach, and that worked very well. But the only person that could have served that notice was the authorised officer. So there's a legal issue here from the point of view of the authorised officers, but just to assure you, authorised officers are appointed under all of our bylaws. For example, the authorised officer for the harbour bylaws is the harbour master, and that's rightly so. It should be the harbour master, because that's the person who's actually on the ground. So in each area, authorised officers are appointed, just to assure you of that, and we do follow up on any issues that arise. But the issues that arise from a point of view of enforcement in all those areas would be far less than what would come up with regards to the parking bylaws.
Sorry. Who's going to come in? Is somebody else coming in?
I just can give an update on the staff resources. I know Councillor O'Brien has mentioned them. We've sanctioned for 6 litter wardens, and we're looking to increase that to 8, and that's part of the budgetary process. The dog wardens, when I took over the Environment Department, had 2 dog wardens, and it now has 4 plus 2, and there's an additional money being made available for the government. And we've been advised just recently that we can now use that money for a further 2 additional dog wardens for 2025. So those resources will be put in place during the year.
Councillor Ryan, you probably should have come in a bit earlier, but allow you in.
Well, it's a point of clarification in relation to Ms Daly, so
yeah,
I couldn't have foreseen what she's going to say.
Please do.
Would there be a legal impediment to having the same person be an authorised officer in several areas?
And I'll bring Councillor Newman in as well.
Thanks, Mayor. Sorry for jumping in there. You cut it off a bit short there. I thought we'd have a bit more time. Look, again, the motion, I'm happy, to agree that it makes pretty sense. But I think from Mr. Storey's point of view, he has put extra wardens out there, and I think that's the way to go. Put some more wardens out there that have the same powers as what Councillor O'Brien is looking for. So, I mean, we need to find the money to try and boost up that, increase fines as much as we can for those that do not observe the rules or the procedures or the bylaws, I should say. So, thank you very much for that.
I'll ask Ms Daly to come in and just clarify that question from Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, that would be correct. If it's a case you end up in court with an issue that you're trying to enforce under the bylaws, I think the first thing that the judge will ask for is the Chief Executive Order, which is showing that you have been appointed as an authorised officer under those particular bylaws. That would be important, yeah.
Different areas.
You would have an authorised officer appointed under certain bylaws, because the bylaws, for example, casual trading bylaws are dealt with just within the operations department. They're dealt with by Dublin 15. So there's an authorised officer there that deals with everything to do with the casual trading bylaws. So they're appointed an authorised officer under the casual trading bylaws.
I think Councillor O'Brien will come in with the answer is yes. You can have somebody. So we think the answer is yes. You can be appointed to 2 separate sets of bylaws.
You can be, yeah.
But you have to be appointed to each.
But you have to be appointed by Chief Executive Order.
Yeah, perfect. Councillor O'Brien.
Sorry, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, thanks for the clarification there, because ultimately, I mean, this is what I would envisage a community warden to be. I just find it, it's difficult to understand in some respects that we've landed at a system that has been the system for a long time, in fairness, that you can have an authorised officer of this council who's looking after one particular matter in a particular area, who might walk past I don't know, a breach of the litter bylaw or a breach of the waste presentation bylaw and not have the power to act. We also have park rangers in all our parks who are not designated as authorised persons. So if there's a dog incident or what have you, the dog wardens are called for, which might again involve traversing the county from wherever they are working there and then to go and deal with an issue in our parks. What I'm suggesting is that the system that we've operated for years and years is probably not now fully fit for purpose. And I'm not suggesting that a transition such as I'm proposing would be an easy transition, but I think it's something that we need to seriously take on and look at what can be done to ensure that where breaches and serious breaches of our bylaws are occurring, that we have the people on the ground in the local areas to actually respond in a timely manner and enforce them. And let's be honest, I mean, I don't think the council bylaws, while Gardaí are authorised persons, I would be surprised if there's a huge amount of fines coming in from Garda activity or Garda enforcement of our bylaws. So this predominantly is on us as a local authority to get right. And I believe that the change of approach that I'm calling for would help us move towards getting that right. And that would indeed be authorised persons who have authorisation to act under multiple bylaws, but not one person having to go from Sutton to Corduff or from Balbriggan down to Santry when an incident occurs, because I've no doubt there's a huge amount of time lost. And as well as that, you know, the requirement for our wardens to be in court when prosecutions are taking place. So we're losing time all over the place in the current system and losing effectiveness, I believe. So I thank those that spoke on the motion, and I would ask that the motion be agreed, Mayor. Thank you.
Is the motion agreed? Motion agreed. Thanks. Item number 28, Councillor J.K. O'Meara, lifeguards on Fingal Beaches, summer 2025. Seconded.
Thank you, Mayor. This motion really means a lot to me. I've raised a few motions relating to this over the years. Reason being, it's a little bit personal because I've had people I know, struggle, and unfortunately, there's been one fatality as a result of their inability to swim. And whilst this is not attributed to the lack of number of, lifeguards at our beaches, but I think, it would be helpful if we had the commensurate number of lifeguards at our beaches, especially during the swimming weeks or swimming months of the year. And I have to also commend Finger County Council for the effort to employ a swimming officer linked up to Swim Island. And I think that program, the program they ran in the last couple of years, is something I want to see continue, to encourage more young people to learn how to swim. So that is tackling the issue, at the heart of it. But then also making sure that we have the number of lifeguards at our beaches is very, very important. And I just want to welcome the report, showing that understanding is already there. So just to, say a little bit more about it, but essentially I welcome the report. Thank you very much.
Councillor Leddy.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, I'm glad to see this on the agenda. It's a subject I have an interest in myself. I might live in the southwest of the county, but I do swim a lot on our beaches, and it's an issue that's been raised with me as well. The report is very detailed, and I appreciate that. Look, the problem is, and we see this in many different sectors. The truth is that the country is at full employment, and recruiting at full employment is very challenging. So, there clearly has been a very good campaign, but if we don't have the 30,
it is a real danger, and we'd hate to hear of a tragedy happening someday at a beach where we were unable to provide lifeguards. So my suggestion would be that I think it's a bit like nurses. You just have to have them. So if we fail to get to 30, I think we need to look at maybe recruiting abroad or using agencies to look at other countries, because I just, the report doesn't specifically say how many they have recruited last year or this year, but if we fall short of what we need, we'll need to go above and beyond to get them, in my view. Thank you.
Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, JK, for putting down this motion. It's an essential kind of resource, especially as we came out of COVID. We've seen the kind of popularity of our beaches in Fingal, and then on top of that, kind of the phenomenon of wild swimming has really taken off. So you'll see people swimming all year at our beaches now, not just during the swimming season. I would like to commend our swimming officer, especially for projects that they ran this summer of teaching people to sea swim. What I would have likened to seeing this report of that the council would take a proactive approach, especially because we haven't met our numbers, and I'm basing that on that we were still advertising the positions well into the swimming season. That a part of the swimming officer would do probably an advanced life-saving course, that we can actually kind of proactively train people during the winter at a subsidised level that might encourage them to then take it on during the summer months after they've kind of newly qualified on a course that we've subsidised. I know we can't exactly, but it would be one way of kind of promoting it and trying to kind of get a bit of kind of community engagement that way. And thank you very much for putting this down in motion and raising this important matter.
If there's no other speakers, I'll come in myself before bringing the manager in. It's a very important motion, and I think there's been a couple of strong points made. One around the all year round nature of swimming now. We have as many people in at a weekend in December at Portmarnock as we used to have at a weekend in June or July. We have, I believe, a huge increase in water sports, and I think that there's a huge voluntary and service provided by the RNLI in terms of rescue, but we don't have the kind of protective services that I think that currently might be warranted. We're in a period of full employment. There used to be, as a lifeguard, there used to be a significant economic advantage over the beach lifeguards were paid better than other lifeguards. That's not necessarily the case anymore. And also there isn't a possibility of, it's not a full-time, long-term job. So you struggle to get people who are looking to treat it as a career and looking for career development in it. So I think a review is absolutely needed. I think we need to find a way to get to 30. I think we could take 50 on our beaches, and I think ideally what I'd like to see us move towards is that you would have a smaller number of people involved in water safety, lifeguarding, more professional equipment, and a professionalisation of it, so that you had a small core, full-time, all year round, who are then capable of acting as a core. And it'll give encouragement to many people then to look at it being perhaps something they'll do for a summer to two and a pathway towards a long-term career. So I want to thank Councillor Onware for bringing the motion, and bring the manager in, who's coming in. Ms. Daly's only too delighted to come in again.
Thanks very much, Mayor. So just to clarify, the lifeguards, provision for the lifeguards is provided for in the budget. We've provided provision for salaries for next year. We would hope to and aim to employ up to 40 lifeguards, and that has been our aim for the last 2 years. However, we've been unable to retain above the 35. Last year we had 28 lifeguards. That worked out for us. It was sufficient. We were able to make sure that the three main beaches, which is Portmarnock, Sutton and Donabate, that they are manned during the very busy hot weather as such. So the provision in the budget is for lifeguards during the bathing season. There's no provision there for lifeguards all year round. We don't have a swim officer, it's a water safety officer. That's who's in place to manage all the lifeguards and to put the regime in place during the bathing season and the weeks that they are on duty at the beaches. The payments with regards to what lifeguards are paid is set down by the Department of the Environment. Most of the positions are filled by third level students. So when we do take that, we take on as many lifeguards as we can, and I can assure you we'll be aiming to do that this year as well, because they do take holidays, so we do have to put cover in place for that. But just to say, we had a very successful, thankfully safe bathing season in 2024. We had 34 people that were rescued. In Donabate there was 4 people rescued. At Portmarnock we had 9 and 7 in Sutton. And those are the 3 busiest beaches, so we always make sure that there's a full complement of lifeguards at those beaches. First aid was given to 185 people, 20 lost children. Advice given by the lifeguards, people come to them, they look for advice. 2,837 pieces of advice given, so we keep records of everything. Accidents that were prevented on the beaches, 597, and other issues that arose, 160. So we had, thankfully, a very successful, safe 2024 season, and our aim would be to do the same in 2025. But I can assure the members that it won't be a case of 28 to 30 lifeguards. If there's 35, 36, 37, and anything up to 40 lifeguards, we will be certainly employing them to ensure that we can provide the service on every beach. But the provision in the budget is for the lifeguards during the bathing season only. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the manager, and thanks to my colleagues for your intervention there. But I suppose the statistics you reeled out on the success of lifeguards at our beaches, lends credence to the motion in itself and, all the comments made. What I would like to add is for us to continue to intensify effort in the area of helping, to teach young people, especially young people. I mean, I can't swim, so I know how difficult it can be for people who can't swim either. And young people really need this as an essential life skill. So if we could do that as a complementary skill, training, and also making sure that we have the necessary number of lifeguards at our beaches. Perhaps, again, just to thank some of my colleagues who mentioned all year round. I know it may not be appropriate at all times, and I know there is sign to say that, there is no lifeguard at a certain time of the year, but we are getting there, and I think it would be necessary for us to continue to intensify effort to provide all the necessary support to that end. So thank you very much. I welcome the report.
The report is noted. Just Mr. Story's come in with a clarification on the swim officer piece.
Yeah, just on the swim officer, there is a co-funded swim officer that's through the sports department, and that there is some lessons that are held and funded through our department, and we're looking to expand that in 2025.
Thanks. So the report is accepted. Item number 29, Councillor Quinlan, Thornton Hall Direct Provision Site. Councillor Quinlan. Do I have a seconder? No seconder, I'm afraid the item won't be taken. Item number 30, Councillor Tormey. Not here. Has anybody been asked or invited to take the motion? No. We'll postpone that then to the next meeting. Councillor Corkery, Autism Friendly County Strategy. Proposer and seconder. Seconded Councillor O'Leary. Yeah. You're looking to put in an amendment? Yeah, I emailed that. You emailed in the amended motion. You propose the amendment? Second of the amendment. The amendment agreed? Okay, we're discussing the amended motion that the Chief Executive initiate the development of autism and neurodiversity county strategy supported by a steering committee and led by autistic and neurodivergent people, their families, carers and service professionals. Councillor Corkery.
Thanks, Mayor. And firstly, I just want to thank those who've contacted me in support of this very important motion, as well as those in the Chamber who have worked on inclusive projects in their own respective towns. As a Swords councillor, I want to commend in particular Councillor Newman's recent work with St Michael's House on developing an autism-friendly community in Swords. And I also commend Councillor Hopkins' motion this evening too. So I want us to build on all of that work. What I'm proposing is that we come together as councillors representing all parts of Fingal and put a framework in place to better support the autism and neurodiverse community, working towards a strategy that looks not just at access to our own services, well that's needed, but at something much more ambitious and far-reaching. Things like encouraging local businesses to become autism friendly and working with them to achieve that. SuperValue, for example, have championed this, and Swords Pavilions have recently opened their new sensory pod. It includes looking at how public services operate within our county. It involves looking at accessible facilities like, for example, communication boards in our parks and public spaces for people who are non-verbal, and fostering in general a better understanding of the language that should be used around autism and neurodiversity for all who live here. Most importantly, I think this is about listening. We need to base such a strategy around those with first-hand experience. I'm not just looking for reports here, I'm looking for a conversation, a multi-stage consultation period involving all aspects of the community with autistic and neurodiverse people at its core. This has been done very successfully in Dublin City with the support of Ireland's autism charity, as I am, with a view to creating the world's first autism-friendly capital city. Dublin City Council also created the role of an autism-friendly city officer to oversee this plan, and I would seek that to be recreated here also. So let's replicate that here in Fingal, because many of us have people in our lives who are neurodiverse, and we all see the work that needs to be done. I note the report makes reference to a county access strategy, which is nearing completion, and that's fantastic and very welcome, but I don't think it's necessarily sufficient to lump the two things together. I would like and prefer something bigger and better, something more interactive, and I want us to put together a framework for, I suppose, more of a county-wide conversation led by neurodiverse and autistic people, and I'd like a dedicated strategy to come from that. Thank you.
Councillor Newman.
Yeah, thanks. Mayor, yeah, I recently did actually put a motion forward for a local area meeting and for the full county council, which was agreed that we would move towards becoming an autism-friendly county in Fingal. And you know, I just from what Councillor Cork has just said, he's explained things very well there, and you know, I don't need to comment any more other than to say I support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, and again, thank you to Councillor Corkery for putting this forward. It's an area I am very passionate about, and I thank his amendment as well. When we were looking at this initially, people might think we're being pedantic when it comes to changing the wording to led by autistic or neurodivergent individuals, but actually it's really key to any sort of strategy like this. It's probably one of the highest or the most regular criticisms that comes up around PPI, in that it's not involving people from the very beginning who are key to this. You'll notice around the health service and different areas of government that autism training now is always led by individuals who have first-hand experience. There's been a lot of criticism in the last few months about the National Autism Strategy and that its pillars didn't cover enough, that there wasn't enough consultation with particular parties that really wanted to be involved, and I think we can rectify that by extending this. I thank the Executive for the report, and I would agree with Councillor Corkery's judgment on it, that I think although the access strategy is needed and very welcome, this is such a large area, it needs specific focus itself, and we need to invest in that. And I foresee that If we did, we'd be looking into areas of how we can really engage with proper, reasonable adjustments at every level of how the council operates, not just looking at sensory environments, but going beyond that and how we really take into account the process and differences that so many neurodivergent people experience. So that might be making serious adjustments to how we impose bylaws that we've mentioned already, or how we expect them to adhere to the procedures that we use for housing. So I thank both the comments so far, and I want to mention I'd be fully supportive of this.
Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. I'd just like to briefly support the motion. I did a Google there, and as I am, we're saying that there's different figures about, what's reliable. I don't know. 3.3% of the population may have autism or autism spectrum disorder. 169,000 is the number. That's April 2024. I don't know where the stat comes from. We need to raise more awareness on autism. I certainly got it on the doors over 2 campaigns. I think we all got it. It comes up regularly. And I would like to see a comprehensive plan, a wide plan, more than access. And the fact that Dublin City Council are doing it, I think is great. And maybe we can learn from their ahead of us, sort of got out of the traps earlier. We can learn from them, cooperate with them maybe, and come up with a plan and a list of actions to assist families, and everyone is listed there, who have to deal with the challenge and the great opportunity sometimes that ASD presents. There are some very interesting characters who have that spectrum, who perform greatly in Ireland and internationally, and then there's some other children who have great challenges with it. So we need to push forward the plan. Skerries is an autism-friendly town since 2019. So Fingal needs to become an autism-friendly county. I think that's what this is about. I think we should support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Healy.
Thanks, Mayor. Mayor, I very much welcome the motion. I think we're seeing great work being done. Certainly, Skerries is an example. Howth, Sutton area is another example where the autism-friendly community was launched late last year, and I was very pleased to hear at that launch both you and the Chief Executive speak so well and kind of give a commitment on behalf of this council, and that reflects the commitment from the many community organisations who are already involved, and I think this motion is exactly the direction we should be going in to put flesh on that commitment. Thanks very much.
Councillor Walsh.
Yeah, I'd also like to support the motion. Thanks to Councillor Corkery for bringing it forward. I think I think we're increasingly aware of the huge challenge for society in including people who are neurodivergent. There are very major obstacles to the inclusion of both neurodivergent children and adults in education, in various other areas, and I think Fingal needs to take the lead in addressing that. Obviously, there are certain areas that which are outside in other European countries. The council would have responsibility for education, public transport. We don't have that here, but I think the council can take the lead by developing a distinctive strategy on it. It's very important that autistic people are at the centre of that strategy, that they're centrally involved and leading the development of it. But I think this is a very good idea. I think I'm right in saying Skerries is the only autism-friendly town in the county. I mean, if I'm happy to be corrected on that. But I know there is interest from a number of community groups in Dublin 15, in either Castleknock or Blanchetown, becoming an autism-friendly town. I think a strategy like that would help to underpin that and provide more resources and more planning, more resources and a more strategic approach where towns or villages want to take the lead in terms of inclusion and become autism-friendly towns. So I think I would fully support it.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to thank Councillor Corkery for raising the motion. As others have said, it's really important. And where we have like the likes of Skerries, and then we have community groups in Swords, and also Howth and Sutton, and I'm sure lots of other areas as well, where we have that groundswell, in our communities. That's where our ambition as a council must match those people, because they need supports, and the more that we can do for them, the better. And I think making our towns and villages more inclusive for neurodiverse people makes our towns and villages more inclusive for everybody. So I definitely welcome this, and well done.
Councillor Mulligan.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Corkery and all the other speakers for speaking on the subject. It's an area I work in and I'm very passionate about as someone who manages respite service for children who are neurodiverse and have intellectual disabilities on a daily basis. The one thing I would mention is that everyone has spoke about the need to engage with individuals who are on the spectrum or are neurodiverse. Often the fact these people are non-verbal and have significant developmental delays or issues with cognitive understanding, even if their verbal skills might be, fairly au fait, but their actual ability to process information isn't. So it's about how we display information and give information across about consultations, about engaging with these communities. I noticed in the reply that they talked about different stakeholders engaging in the programme, that the actions of the strategy that was already laid out in terms of the disability community. What groups are they? How did they communicate? What type of stakeholders are you engaging with? Because they are really important issues. And also, we have to look at the fact that the council has done a great job anytime we've asked them to do. Every St. Patrick Festival since 2020 has had a quiet space allocated to it, where we looked at giving space for children who needed a quiet space and allowing their siblings and other family members enjoy the parade whilst they were in a quiet space, which is a great asset. And As I Am had a festival at Christmas, a Christmas fair, which the council at their own expense kept the Christmas fair stuff up even after terrible weather conditions, which can only be complimented. So we are making progress, but what we need to do is engage with the right stakeholders on the issues and not just look at As I Am do amazing work. They work with very high-functioning autistic individuals. There's a huge catchment out there, and we also need to look at the absolute catastrophe we have in actually getting assessment of needs and getting people over the line who need the diagnosis in the first place before they can even advocate for themselves in the first instance. Thank you.
Before we bring the manager in, from my own point of view, and I want to compliment Councillor Mulligan. He's already said a huge amount, and I know from friends' experience the work that Councillor Mulligan does and how good he is at his job. So I think that should be acknowledged when we're discussing that right here. So we have an expert in our midst, and I think, from my own point of view, the council, and there's another motion regarding it later, the council has really improved and takes this very seriously. The Chief Executive has spoken about it. I visited there, and I will support the motion. However, within the response, I think it's also very important to acknowledge, as Councillor Mulligan alluded to, in relation to people who are neurodiverse, who are autistic, but also in relation to other access issues, that what we've got to be very, and I'm sure it means we've also got to be sure that we give all access issues, that we have an access officer, that we become just as aware of all of the challenges that face people, not just in relation to neurodivergency or autism, but in relation to all kinds of other access issues, whether they be mental health challenges, whether they be physical disability challenges and others. And I think it's with the access officer, which is something that was brought about by a motion from former Mayor Shauna O'Ruddick. I think we would all benefit, from a presentation from the access officer and the access policy when it comes through. I think it is possible to do both, but I do want to make sure that we're cognizant that we don't end up, that we maintain a balance between the resources that we invest in everybody who requires that support. I've run out of time, so if the manager would like to come in.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, councillors, for all your contributions. I suppose just in terms of the access strategy, Look, it's a plan that's been developed by our access officer in consultation with people with disabilities and the wider public to ensure that we as a public body continue to make the wide range of services we provide accessible and inclusive to all, regardless of ability, age, race, background, etc. And it'll be, and it is being developed with the national policies and legislation such as Disability Act 2005, Equal Status Acts, Public Sector Duty, and international rights legislations under the UN Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And I suppose it's important to note that we have a duty to accommodate all. So I'd be just cautious that we don't want to just develop a strategy for autism and neurodiversity, that we as a council and as a public body, we have a duty to accommodate everybody with all levels of disability and ability. And the preparation of the access strategy, and to answer Councillor Mulligan's question there, the access officer reached out to disabled persons representative organisations, DPROs, and asked for their respective inputs, and these included As I Am, who are the DPO and are the National Autism Charity. We also reached out to a number of local Fingal groups and Neurodiversity Ireland were also contacted in relation to input into the strategy. And I suppose the strategy, really we see this as a starting block that we can build on. It will have in the area, or in the order of 40 actions, and all of those actions flowed from the submissions and the results of the surveys that we got from all of the disability groups right across the county that we engaged with. And look, the access officer held quite a number of workshops and reached out and visited quite a number of local groups across the county. So the strategy will be sort of a living document with a steering group which will oversee the implementation of all of the actions, and will also have the flexibility to absorb new initiatives as they arise, open to new actions being incorporated, and certainly look at autism-friendly, neurodiverse-friendly towns and villages across the county. But I suppose what I would ask is that councillors wait until the strategy is completed, and it will be in the next number of weeks. And I take the point, Mayor, that we'll be happy to give the councillors a briefing on the strategy. You see what it is. It will encompass all of the disabilities and abilities that are across the county, not just neurodiverse issues. And I think we if we could look at that first and see what we think of it. As I said, it's the starting point or the building block that we can go forward from. I know Councillor Corkery had mentioned that we needed a bigger and a better plan. So I think maybe give us a chance to present the plan, and then we can look and see what else we need. And we're more than happy, and the access officer is certainly more than happy to work with any groups out there that want to contribute. And look, we've done so already, so we'd be happy to continue that. So I would just ask that we wait for the access strategy to be delivered, and then we see where we go from there. So, thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Corkery.
Thank you. Could I just ask when you expect the strategy to be published? If it's possible to give it. That's okay.
Want to give, but it should be in the next 6 weeks or so, I would hope. Certainly by the end of quarter one. It'll be there. Quarter one. Yeah.
I think the sentiment in the room is clear. I do think it's possible to do both, and I think it's possible to maintain the sentiment of a separate document. And while I'm fully behind the access strategy that's being developed by the Corporate Services Department, and I wouldn't take away from it, I would like to go further with something separate, and I'd encourage the executive to look at the Dublin City Council plan. I do think it is possible to have both to ensure that we get this motion passed now again to maintain that sentiment for future reference. I would like to ask for a vote on the issue, please. Thank you.
Is the motion agreed? Agreed. The motion is agreed. Item number 32, Councillor Hopkins. Seconded.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to accept the report. It's an unusual motion in the sense that what I'm asking the council to do is to recognise and commend the work that has already been done by Fingal County Council. You can really see the difference that it makes to parents and families when they have an inclusive space, a safe space for their families and children at our events, which sometimes can be overwhelming for some people in our community. The only word of caution I would have on the report is that the report is excellent and we need to continue with the good work, but just about the mentioning the budgets and that the budgets are under pressure. And I would just caution the council, I mean, if our budgets are under pressure, that this should be the last thing that we would row back on. But other than that, I accept the report. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Hopkins. Item number 32, Councillor Donnelly. Seconded, Councillor Hanafy. Sorry. Apologies, item number 33, apologies. Seconded, Councillor Hanafy.
Thanks a lot. This is something that comes up every now and again in this chamber, and I do think it's something that is really important. I was just going through a few of our own documents there earlier on, and just to give you a little bit of an outline, the active travel strategy document says active travel means travelling with a purpose, using your own energy. It includes walking, scooting, running, wheeling and cycling. It includes all journeys with an emphasis on distances under 5k, including trips to work, education, shopping, visiting friends and for recreation. I think a lot of the time when we talk about active travel, we just see cyclists and we see cyclists commuting. So active travel considers the needs of those who use prams, pushchairs, scooters, wheelchairs and adapted cycles, as well as new mobility modes such as e-scooters and e-bikes. It further goes on to say, Fingal County Council is working to build active travel into everyday life as part of normal daily routines. And our vision for Fingal is to ensure that walking, cycling and wheeling will become a realistic and safe choice for everyday short journeys. We will achieve this vision by putting active travel first in our planning, design and delivery of infrastructure and initiatives. Our Active Together local sports and physical activity plan says Fingal County Council has unveiled a new initiative that aims to transform the sports landscape in Fingal, enhancing participation and access for residents and using sport to help tackle social issues and build communities. The sports team proactively targets all areas in Fingal, particularly areas of disadvantage and population growth, to support key groups such as new communities, people with disabilities, LGBTQI+, women and families to become more active. In 2020, the Journal conducted a survey of 10,000 people asking, do you feel safe in public parks after dark? 68% said no. So we have fantastic facilities in Fingal. A lot of these cannot be used after dark. People and women and girls in particular, but also those with disabilities and our older population, which I think sometimes we forget about them when we're talking about things like this. They don't feel safe to go out after dark because the areas are just not well lit. So this effectively means that our parks and public spaces are no-go areas for women once it becomes dark. That means no dog walking, no running, no walking in these spaces. Mugas, calisthenics, dog runs and exercise equipment that we spend a lot of money on cannot be used before 8:30 a.m. or after 4:30 p.m. in December and January. We have older people that are actually afraid to go outside the door after dark. They don't go out in darkness. So we're spending eye-watering amounts of money on other projects, and they're all worthy. I'm not saying for a minute that they aren't, but we are spending a lot of money. It's about choices. There are many benefits to be gained from lighting up public areas in terms of safety, active travel, health benefits, social inclusion and community building. The budget for 2025 has been allocated, and I see in the response a lot of this comes down to money, and in my opinion it's all down to money. But we could look at 2026. I think a pilot project is a very reasonable ask for an initiative that would have such positive outcomes for our communities. Thank you.
Councillor Mulligan.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Donny, for bringing this forward. I actually I agree with the motion. I think it's very worth having the conversation. I think we can all think of examples of regional and local parks where we have satellite estates or areas which have difficulty with access to main roads and actually access through the park to other parts of their local communities is actually the best route, but it's only viable during daytime hours. I can think of numerous examples in the Ward Valley Park and others. I fully accept from the report that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, so therefore putting in lights could, as you say, increase antisocial behaviour. On the other hand, it could decrease it because it's more visible and everything else. It costs more money and all, but I do think it's worth having the conversation because I think there's many examples of areas. I think Knoxland is a great example of an area that we just will never be able to make safe, to have walking and cycling infrastructure on the main road, and it will only ever be viable through the regional park. So how we make it safe and light up an area or look at strategies to make routes safe through regional parks is something that we will have to do in the future in certain areas, and I do think it's worth having a pilot programme. In saying that, we've seen pilot programmes of public toilets, and public toilets work well in certain regional parks and it being an unmitigated disaster in others. So you can't just say what works in one area is going to automatically work in another area. But I'd love to see the conversation, have a more thorough conversation on it, because I do think it's really worthwhile. And the report mentions Darkness into Light, which is volunteer-led, which the council are great supportive of, but there's a huge amount of insurance and legal stuff that goes in there to actually make that viable and make that happen because of the time of day and stuff. So, yeah, just looking forward to the conversation. Thanks, Councillor Stanley, for bringing it forward.
Councillor Smith.
Yes, thank you. And again, I'm fully supportive of this. I think it's a great idea. In the park adjacent to myself, we had serious incidents of antisocial behaviour over the Christmas period, and speaking to reps in Swords Manor FC, the damage caused to the local pitches has cost them in the region of €50,000 over a year in terms of renting other facilities. So I think there's a lot of caution and there's a lot of apprehension around the use of CCTV, and there's obviously there's complications with that, but actually we need to really grasp that nettle going forward. To link this a little bit to the previous comments that Councillor Mulligan made as well in relation to supporting individuals with intellectual disability, not everybody fits the criteria of being able to use parks and public facilities at a designated time. Years ago when I was working in a similar area to himself, we would have been out in the hours of darkness helping people self-regulate by going through our parks, and that was essential for those people's well-being. So I think we really need to look at a broader view of this, and a pilot project is exactly the perfect thing we need to push it forward. So I'd be fully supportive. Thank you.
Councillor Quinn.
Also be supportive of it. Can I make a suggestion? There's a lovely park in Balbriggan called the Millpond Park. We could probably start there, just being parochial. No, but on a serious note, I recall some 10 years ago, Kenore Park and a previous councillor looking to put lighting in Kenore Park, and the response came back in regards to probably looking at antisocial behaviour as a response, and that seems to have not changed here with the response that we're getting here. But I just think we're a victim of a very successful active travel plan, and this pilot project is the next step after the successful active travel. we need to look at opening up our regional parks after hours, because there's so many groups involved. We were talking about the sea swimming, but there's also running groups. We have a running group in Balbriggan running around the town. Fantastic facilities around the town, by the way, for running. But if that running group was able to go through our soon-to-be Breamore Regional Park and to our Gillen Castle and our Gillen Park, that'd be fantastic. That'd be great, and we can include other running groups from across North Fingal all meeting up, and it's great for social interaction and for getting people out there and enjoying the local amenities. So I would be supportive. Thank you.
Councillor Newman.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. It's probably not an easy one to make a decision on. I'm kind of for a pilot, some sort of a pilot that takes a lot of other things into account, such as I think maybe the park to be open would be more suitable for people, groups like runners and maybe dog walkers to an extent, as long as there's a number of them and not just one or two. So I think probably that could be introduced as part of the pilot and work along those lines. I mean, we do have people use the regional parks at night for sleeping and drinking, and you know, the pilot might actually have a positive effect on that by stopping it. It's that wouldn't be my intention to be walking to a park at night, like whatever about anybody feeling unsafe. I certainly don't think it's a great idea. But you know, it can be lit up, fair enough. I mean, the park up in River Valley has a football pitch and it's open at 10 o'clock, you know. It's supposed to, I think, turn off lights around 9:30, 10, or well, no later than that anyway. And that's well used, and that's so. The rest of the park's not really used that much, but I think anybody that goes down is probably not making a wise decision. So unless there's a pilot with the lighting arrangement, and there again we have parks beside houses, and if there's lights on, that's again causing issues, light pollution to the people there, you know. But I certainly think it's worth looking at, and just to ask if there are any other parks out there that anybody knows of anywhere in Ireland or any other country that actually has that facility. I'd like to hear from them. Thanks.
From my own point of view, I think I do have some concerns about some of the aspects of opening up parks after hours. I think in terms of the budget, I think we need to be able to allocate resources and to look at how we're going to allocate the resources and raise the resources to be able to do it. But specifically, and I think it's what's good for one park is not going to be good for another park. I think we have there's a report on an area which is not a park, but is one of the functions of the parks that we have is to provide biodiversity. And there's a conflict and a tension between different functions within parks. And I would have concerns about provision of additional lighting in areas where the parks are significant for things like bats. And if in any park that provides, that has an aspect there where there's forestry or where there's wildlife, I think you really have to take a view on which is the most important, whether given the having that rest there. I think in relation to, but again, there may be some areas or specific parks where getting from A to B active travel, that you want to provide an active travel route through the park. So I'm not sure that a pilot for a single park is going to be give you learnings on every park. What you actually need is to decide on a case-by-case basis where you need to put in active travel and where you need to have access to it. So it depend on it from a case-by-case basis rather than an overall project. Manager?
Okay, so my response there is with regards to the pilot. I have no provision in the budget for a pilot, and I have no idea with regards to what the terms of that pilot or what your idea would be with regards to the terms of that pilot. But I mean, so you're talking about putting in public lighting, you're talking about getting electricity in, you're talking about resources, park rangers. And there's all a cost to that, and I don't have it in the revenue budget at the moment. We have over 4,900 acres of open space within this county. It would be absolutely impossible for us to light every single piece of open space, and I certainly wouldn't be recommending that. And we have our bylaws. Bylaws are very clear that the parks are closed at a particular time because we don't have the resources to be in, to have park rangers in there late at night with regards to having a presence, Fingal presence there. Antisocial behaviour is an issue. Whether we like it or not, it is an issue, and it can be an issue. And it's part of the problem that we have there. We also have on Garda Síochána. They have a huge remit. We're opening up parks, putting lights in it, and they have to patrol those areas. But we have our parks bylaws. They've been adopted by the council, and the parks are closed at a particular time in the evening. If there's areas where, for example, there is an all-weather pitch, we have made provision in the capital budget for lighting at our pitches, and to make those accessible in the evening time. We do want them to be used. We can see Tyrrellstown, we can see River Valley, they are being used late into the night, and there's lighting from the gate up to the actual pitch itself. So it's done on a case-by-case basis, and we do intend to put the public lighting in at the pitches, in as many of the pitches as we possibly can, and we'll do that. But I certainly don't have any provision in the revenue budget for a pilot with regards to what the councillor is raising here. So that's my position on it. But we'll certainly look at areas where we can put in public lighting to give access to the all-weather pitches or the playing pitches, and we'll certainly do that. And we have done that in a number of cases. So that's the executive's position on it.
Councillor Donnelly.
Hello, and thanks everyone who came in. Firstly, I think in terms of biodiversity, I think that's a given, that we wouldn't be looking to put public lighting in where there's bats or any other species that we would be wanting to protect. This is not asking for public lighting in all of our parks. We do light up parks from the gates to all-weather pitches, and they are really well used. Surely that in itself would encourage us to light up our mugas, to light up our tennis courts where we have them, to light up our dog runs, to encourage people to use these facilities. Yes, we would need park rangers. I don't think that's a bad thing. In terms of the Gardaí, I have yet to meet a Garda, and I actually ask this question very often because it's something that I have looked for quite a lot. And Hartstown Park, we have got a little section of lighting from the all-weather pitch to another entrance in the park now. But a guard has yet to tell me to agree that putting lighting in an area encourages antisocial behaviour. Our guards are already in our public parks that are open because they need to deal with antisocial behaviour. The more people that use them, the more passive surveillance there is, the less antisocial behaviour that there will be there. We don't have the money for 2025's budget. We could look at 2026, we could look at 2027. We do need to start a conversation about this. We can't just down tools once it gets dark in terms of access for our residents to these areas where they can get exercise. And I'll finish on other after-hour sporting activities are catered for in community centres, gyms and public sports hubs. They all cost money. Our public parks and our outdoor areas don't. So I'd like the motion agreed, please.
Is the motion agreed? No. So call a vote. Vote. Three minutes have been called. Thanks. sorry, apologies, absolutely. Green in favour of Councillor Donnelly's motion for a pilot project in a regional park, and red is against. Is that correct? Yeah? Okay, thanks Councillor Donnelly for the reminder.
Members, 18 have voted yes in favour of the motion, 0 members have abstained and 10 members have voted against the motion.
So the motion passes. Right. We have item number 34, Councillor Dara Butler, Councillor Smith, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Kelly isn't here. Swords, Tidy Towns. Councillor proposed. Seconded, Councillor Newman.
I suppose the plan wasn't this not to be anything too formal, not a formal thing. I suppose it's more a casual event after one of our Swords area meetings, just to acknowledge the fantastic achievement of Swords Tidy Towns. Former 20 years ago in 2004, the IBAL report in 2003 listed Swords as one of the dirtiest towns in Ireland to litter black spot. So it's just really to have a kind of local celebration after one of our area meetings to recognise after 20 years, after 6 silver medals in a row, that Swords achieved their first ever gold medal. So yeah, so just to agree to report if that's possible. Thank you.
Agreed. And just it has to come, any such reception has to come before the full council, which is why it needs to be agreed. And I think it's a very modest reception. I think nobody need to be worried about massive expenditure on this, but thanks. The motion is passed. Yeah. Item number 35, Councillor Humphreys, Councillor James Humphreys. Second, Councillor McCamley. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm kind of slightly disappointed with the response. I certainly was sent in with more additional information, kind of with the original motion. That was kind of seeking that this report would kind of contain a review of the current agreements between the NTA and the Council regarding bus stops, that there would be an examination of the financial, logistics and operational implications of the Council kind of assuming responsibility for shelters in the vicinities of bus stops, including kind of the installation and the ongoing maintenance, kind of consideration of what the legal and regulatory requirements would be, analysis of kind of what happens in other European countries, and then obviously kind of the review of any potential revenue stream that would this generate, and also that it would be completed in time for us as councillors to consider it for the 2026 budget. What I'm seeking is a kind of an extension of what we spoke about at our last meeting, and the supply of shelters at bus stops. And what I'm talking about is our public realm spaces and supplying a facility of seating within our public streets in the vicinity of bus stops. As is, for example, we are going to be spending millions during the Sustainable Swords project, and kind of slap bang in the heart of that between the council, the culture quarter and the castle is 5, which I would describe as aesthetically ugly bus stops. And when we kind of look at all our kind of programs about revitalising our central business districts, the most important element of that is attracting footfall back to our streets. And that is kind of one of the elements that I'm looking for a kind of comprehensive review of seated shelters on our public realm in the vicinity of bus stops that are controlled and owned by the council. And so all I'm looking for is a serious consideration that will be put forward to the relevant SPC for us as councillors to consider that as we are considering the 2026 budget. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Hadey.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And I'd like to strongly support this motion. I'm a bit concerned about some of the response. Like, we are responsible for the public realm within which the bus stops are placed and within which the bus shelters are currently placed. I'm not aware of any legal impediment to us providing our own bus shelters, if that's what we wanted to do, but it seems that the first line of the report is, it's nothing to do with us. That's not actually what the motion is looking for. It's looking for a report on the viability of us doing the work of installing and maintaining bus shelters. And I think that we should be looking at that, but we should be engaging with the NTA. And we've had a bit of a difficulty with some of our own active travel work, our design work, where the location of the bus stop seems to be kind of taken as fixed. And we go through iterations of design without talking to the NTA about bus stop locations, which often need to be, ultimately in the end, do need to be moved. We have a situation at the moment where the NTA is putting bus shelters very low down its priorities and producing very, very few bus shelters on a national basis, not just in Fingal. And we've an instance in the Howth area where the NTA has promised to fully fund the forecourt area outside Howth Station, where there's a need for a bus shelter for the number 6, for the terminus of the number 6. So people are going to be coming off the trains and waiting for a bus without a shelter to take them up the hill. And we haven't had any engagement for this council for the last 3 years in terms of allocating resources to do a fully funded project. So I think we need to improve our game when it comes to bus shelters and public transport interaction, and I strongly welcome this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Murphy.
Thanks, Mayor, and I'd like to also support this motion. I think that we need to look at the areas where we want to encourage people to use public transport. We have to make sure that within that area we actually have the opportunity for people in the weather that we get in this country, where they can stay dry and comfortable to some degree if they're going to wait on public transport. Looking at the model that's used by the NTA, it has to be questioned, because they don't actually supply shelters at all. What they do is they use the location of a bus stop to be a space for advertisement and yield revenue from it. So you have to then really question that and say, is that what we're actually supposed to be doing here? Are we supposed to be creating a location for somebody to actually get onto a bus and be taken on a journey? And within that, how do we deliver it? As a consequence, what's happened is that some of these locations are very, very busy, and therefore present a real commercial opportunity for a value for the NTA. And I would question the morality of that. And we should question how then are they not forced into a situation where the areas that are less well populated or used are negated from having the opportunity to have a bus shelter as a consequence of not being able to deliver a value back, a monetary value back. So the whole principle of the way in which the shelters are supplied is questionable. I think what we could do as a local authority, we could be the forerunners in all of this, and we could be looking at areas, particularly in the rural aspect, where there's a need for more shelter, and in some instances there's also a need for a physical bus stop, which doesn't exist. And it's just people know by the location that that's where the bus stops. That's ridiculous to be thinking that that's the way it still prevails in the rural area in Fingal. So again, wanting to support the motion, and I think we should look at how we can actually look to work with the NTA in order to create the opportunity to deliver shelters around all the bus stops in Fingal.
Councillor Quinn.
I'd also support the motion. I think we should be looking at the viability of this through the council. It's done in several cities across Europe, and I don't think it should be left to the National Transport Authority for the reasons that Councillor Murphy has mentioned and had said previously at a local area meeting. But I'm just thinking of a route, the 101 going from Drogheda and we're going towards Swords, and the amount of industrial units along the old Dublin Belfast road now have popped up or have been built over the years, with workers going in, getting buses at 6 in the morning in clement weather. And I don't think we should be leaving it to the National Transport Authority. I think as a council we should be playing an active role with the NTA in supplying shelters or looking for the viability of putting shelters in certain areas where there is a large congregation of people at certain times during the day. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks, Councillor Humphreys, for raising this important issue. I have raised it a number of times myself. Apart from the lack of bus shelters, there's bus stops around the place, and you'll see them. And there's a bus stop, and there's a piece of concrete underneath them with just like enough space for one person to balance on, and then there's no footpath to even get to this piece of concrete. It's actually outrageous. And as Tony has said there, we seem to have, we make a provision for advertising shelters. And so as a result, we have lots of excuses why we wouldn't have a bus shelter there, because there's not enough space, etc. But we could move the bus shelter or the bus stop, or we could make the bus shelters a bit smaller. But the absolute least that we could be doing for people who are relying on public transport, who want to use public transport, is in a country where it's wet and windy to make provision for bus shelters. I'm surprised to hear David, maybe David said this before, about it's not up to the NTA to, we could do this ourselves, because we had a situation probably 3 years ago. I asked for a number of bus shelters in the Baldoyle area. Now, eventually, probably a year ago, the NTA did put up planning permission for them, but a year later there's no sign of them, so I don't know what's taken them so long. But if there is a possibility for Fingal County Council to make provision of bus shelters, it is absolutely something we should be pursuing. Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I've no difficulty supporting the motion given the way it's worded, and looking to explore the matter further at the relevant SPC. I do think we could probably say, or you could probably second guess what the response would be in terms of whether it would be viable or believed to be viable for the council to start doing it, because we would have to look at the budgetary implications then of such a move. The point I think was Councillor Healy made, or possibly it was Councillor Humphreys, around the Sustainable Swords project, and hopefully a major transformation of the main street of our county town here, which is badly needed and long overdue, is a good one, because we shouldn't actually be designing public realm projects and kind of saying, okay, well, that little whatever size they are, 3 metre by 8 metre or whatever size bus shelter, that's not really our problem, and it's somebody else's, and that can really do down or detract from a public realm project straight away. So I think there is scope for us, when we're looking at a big project such as Sustainable Swords, to start making them a bit more aesthetically pleasing, less of the kind of advertising component, etc., and more in keeping with what you want the space to be when the project is done. So that's a long-winded way of saying I'll support the motion, but I'm not sure whether the response that eventually comes in front of an SPC is something that Councillor Humphreys will want. Thanks.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I think the National Transport Authority would be delighted if we pass this motion, because then they could take the funding they were going to allocate to Fingal and spend it somewhere else, or perhaps not spend it at all. I think what might be more useful would be to find out what exactly is their allocation for Fingal, or if they do have an allocation for this part of Dublin, this part of the country, and if not, why not? And what is the, how do they go about deciding where to place bus shelters? Because it certainly shouldn't be on the basis of where they're going to get the best advertising along roadsides and that, which to me seems to be the method that they use. So perhaps we could have the NTA into the SPC and to give us a background on how they allocate bus shelters and why more are not being installed around so that we can get more people using public transport.
Councillor Mulligan.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to Councillor James Humphreys for bringing this forward. I suppose I disagree with Councillor Dennison in terms of the NTA won't have been materially impacted by a report unless the report amounts to something that actually impacts the NTA when it comes to, if it comes to fruition and it recommends an outcome that would actually impact them. A report in and of itself is just that, to look at the, I suppose, how feasible it is or what it would look like in this management area. What I would say is that we're arguing a lot over certain areas just to get bus stops, never mind bus shelters. So at what point, what's more important? We have a huge amount of areas, particularly in the rural community, which are missing bus stops in the first instance where we need them, never mind bus shelters. So sometimes we're playing catch up and sometimes we're trying to redevelop areas. So I think we need a streamlined process where we can look at the public transport infrastructure and actually access to public transport and how safely we manage the access to access it in the first place as an overall thing in this county, never mind just to put shelters on their own. But I will support the motion if it goes to a vote. Thank you.
Councillor Hannafy.
Thank you. I'd like to support this motion, a good motion. I know I'll speak for there's areas within Dublin 15 where there's no bus shelters on main roads. There's I have put in to the NTA for bus shelters. You don't hear back, then it'll take so long. But now there's, as somebody else said, we've many industrial estates up there. The buses go through. There's no bus shelters. That's when the bus does come. You have Tyrrellstown, no buses, no bus shelters, etc. But yes, I support the motion. Thank you.
Very quickly, I'm conscious we've only 3 other motions left, but I think the debate is illustrative of why the report will be valuable. I received a response back in answer to the question of why there was a bus shelter had been removed from a bus stop. It's gone nearly 14 months. The response I received was that there was a private organisation which was responsible for refurbishing all of the bus shelters, and they would do so in the time that they were deciding to do so. So I think it's really important that we understand how bus shelters are allocated or operated, and because what Councillor Humphreys is trying to do is illustrate that there's a problem and that the current way is happening is not working, and it's not working for the people of Fingal. So that's why I think it's reasonable to look at for a report to be presented to the Transport SPC. And the fact that there's different opinions about what way it operates here means that we don't have a clear understanding. I don't have a clear understanding of what it would take to get the bus shelter back that's nearly gone 12 months. Thanks. James Humphreys. Chief Executive is looking, the manager is looking to come in first, sorry.
I'm having an awful night.
You get all the good ones.
I mean, the response I've given is factually that is, we don't manage and maintain the bus stops. I don't have provision in the revenue or the capital budget for doing that. The NTA have the budget for the management and installation of bus stops, and that's provided for by the government at a national level. Just to put on the record, I'm disappointed to hear that you think that some of the members think we don't engage with the NTA with regards to the bus stops. The traffic engineers engage with the NTA with regards to where they're putting a bus stop all the time. That's done. So just wanted to reassure the members on that. Anytime a new bus stop is going in, or if we're moving a bus stop, or they wish to move a bus stop, there's ongoing engagement between operations and the NTA with regards to that. It's just not within our remit. It's certainly not within the budget, and I couldn't even imagine how I would go about deciding how much it's going to cost for us to take over the management and maintenance of bus stops on lands that we don't own. The lands aren't even in our ownership. So I would recommend to the members, from the point of view of allocation of the bus stops and how do they allocate the bus stop, that certainly would be something that could be, if the SPC agreed, I can bring it to the next SPC, and if they agree that, we can ask the NTA in to give us an understanding on that. I don't see anything, that's very reasonable. I think that would be probably the starting point. But there's, to take on the management and maintenance of the bus stops and to put that into the revenue budget, and to pass that cost then on to the public under the local property tax and the commercial ratepayers, I mean, that's just not sustainable. The money is provided 100% by the government to the NTA for the management and maintenance of bus stops. But certainly the allocation of bus stops and where they go and where we want them in this county, that is certainly something we could look at. If the chair of the SPC is in agreement, I can certainly discuss it with them when we can bring it to the SPC. But it would be, how do they allocate where the bus stop is going?
Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for the response. I'm certainly not talking about bus stops. Bus stops are under the remit of the NTA. I'm talking about sheltered seating in the vicinity of a bus stop that is in the public realm, controlled by Fingal County Council, which is colloquially called a bus shelter. To progress this conversation, progress this kind of discussion that has been going on, and I kind of recognise that Councillor Murphy actually had a motion last month calling on the NTA to come before us to discuss this specifically with the NTA. But I do believe that this is a viable pass. I accept that Councillor O'Brien is probably right. I'm not going to exactly like what comes back, but that's why I comprehensively laid out the 6 things I wanted to see included in the report when I sent this motion in, and the last line was that it could be for 2026 for our consideration in preparing a budget, because I know full well it's probably not going to be exactly viable across the county if we so choose to include it in our budget for 2026. I certainly would hope that I'd have the support, but if it's not agreed verbally, I'll be putting it to a vote.
Is the motion agreed? Agreed. We're on to the last 3 motions here. Just before we go, Councillor Doyle has asked that members be made aware that not everybody had the opportunity to attend the funeral of her husband Derek. There is a service on the 19th, and I will circulate details by email to councillors, and if anybody wishes to attend, you'd be more than welcome. In relation to the next 3 items, with the permission of Councillor Walsh and Councillor McCamley, I'll take item 37 quickly before item 36, because I think it's something we can pass quickly with a proposed. Oh, sorry, Councillor, have you proposed it? The purchase and compulsory purchase proposed, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. Agreed? Yeah. Okay, carry your motion, no problem whatsoever. Councillor Walsh, you have the floor.
Proposed. Thanks, Mayor. Shouldn't take.
Seconded, Councillor McCammon.
Shouldn't take too long. Yeah, this is. I suppose this was also discussed at the area committee specifically with reference to Dublin 15. This is because wheelchair users are required by Irish Rail to book a ramp in advance of travelling with Irish Rail, usually at least 24 hours in advance, and they're asked to supply a list of details each time they want to make a single journey. That process is not feasible for people who want to commute on a daily basis, and it leads to some people not using the train at all, and wheelchair users not having access to the train on a practical basis. So that imposes an unreasonable burden on people with disabilities. It singles them out, and it's fundamentally the wrong thing to do in this day and age. Irish Rail should be able to ensure independent access to the train by wheelchair users. It's not a luxury item, should be seen as a basic right. The notice on the DART, the notice period on the DART for wheelchair users was reduced to 4 hours, but that doesn't apply generally across the rail network. So that's a further inequality for a majority of wheelchair users who don't happen to use the DART. Now, Irish Rail have recently agreed to do a pilot project on the M3 Parkway train station, which is the spur of the Maynooth line out to Meath, to look at a raised platform, providing a raised platform for accessibility. That's a step in the right direction, but a single station pilot project isn't enough. We should be looking for a commitment to guarantee universal access at all stations on the line. And that's why I put forward this motion. It's a way of, obviously non-statutory, but it's a way of voicing our concerns and placing further pressure on Irish Rail and establishing that we want to see a universally accessible train service where wheelchair users are treated equally and they are given the basic right to use public transport. Thanks, Mayor.
Now, I propose to extend the meeting to finish this item. Seconded. Seconded, Councillor Mulligan agreed. Councillor Haughey.
Yeah, look, I'll be quick. I suppose I support the motion. There's a very clear example of where this hasn't happened. That's Clongriffin Dart Station. It's often not accessible from the Baldoyle side because of the stairwell with a lift, which is often broken, meaning people who are wheelchair users can't use it, those with prams, and there's also a hotbed for antisocial behaviour. People don't feel safe using it. Unfortunately, I don't have much faith in Irish Rail or the NTA fixing this. They had a meeting with councillors recently, and although the changes are welcome, all the women in the room, including Councillor Joan Hopkins, said that they would not feel safe still using this station. So I think it's not going to be solved by Irish Rail or the NTA, unfortunately. I think there's going to have to be a CPO of this structure, which leads to Clongriffin Dart Station. That's something that has to obviously be sorted out outside the council, but I support the motion in principle anyway, so thanks.
Councillor Shovlin.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Walsh, for bringing this forward. It's something that came up for me a couple of times as well during the recent elections. I don't think it's acceptable whatsoever, and can probably nearly preempt the response that we'll get something along the lines of the great plans that we have for the future. But I think there really needs to be something done in the interim to ensure that our train stations are more accessible for everyone. So I fully support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Walsh, for raising this important issue. I think, as Councillor Haughey said, Clongriffin Dart Station, you've all heard me speak about this on many occasions, is completely inaccessible. Like, let's face facts, but it's a slightly different issue to the one I think John is raising here. And I think, if I understand it correctly, the reason people are expected to give the 24 hours notice or 4 hours notice is that somebody has to come out and put up the ramp. And so if Irish Rail committed, which I don't believe they will, but I'd be very interested to hear what they have to say, to having a member of staff at their train stations, then this wouldn't be an issue. There would be somebody just available when somebody arrives. I mean, if you're in a wheelchair, you should be afforded the exact same freedom as anyone else, that you can decide, oh, I'm going to go and visit somebody, or I'm going to just go out in the train or whatever. You don't need to plan 24 hours in advance. So the added benefit of Irish Rail having somebody at their train stations, it would make their train stations not only accessible but also much safer. There are women up and down this country, people up and down this country, who will not use our public transport because they don't feel safe. This would go a long way to making people feel safer, and I do indeed support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Mulligan.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks to Councillor Walsh for bringing this forward. Yeah, I mean, we've all quoted, the Council has quoted the UNCRPD and the rights of the person with disabilities, and it's the fact is that it isn't, I hate the word disability, because actually what we do, it's our society and the environment that we live in, and the environments that we live in that disable people. A person in a wheelchair should be able to leave their home and access a train station themselves if they want to, via footpath to their nearest train station. Unfortunately, there are so many factors within our society and the environments that we live in which disable people with mobility issues, with physical, mental and intellectual disabilities, and we as a society need to do the basics right. And providing a wheelchair ramp or someone to put up a wheelchair ramp is so basic. And it's mind-boggling and so frustrating when we have to have conversations like this over the simplest of things. We argue over footpaths and width, and people leaving bins out for days on end so people can't get by in a pram or a wheelchair, but it's basic stuff. And at some stage we have to say, why so much red tape? I think things like this I fully support it, but at some stage we're going to have to get someone out to actually fine services, public entities for not providing basic stuff that actually cause people and disable people from actually utilising the public services. Thank you.
Councillor Walsh.
Thanks to all the members who contributed. As Councillor Hopkins is right, it's the requirement that a ramp has to be provided by a staff member. There's various ways to deal with it, and I also fully agree with Councillor Mulligan. This is an injustice that's invisible to most of us, but that has a really significant impact on disabled people. And I think we just need to play our part in putting as much pressure on Irish Rail and the NTA as we can to get it resolved. So I'd like to agree the motion.
Motion agreed.
Thanks.
Agreed. Thank you very much, everybody, for your cooperation. We got through everything. Apologies for being 3 minutes over to the staff.